Because nothing can top the crazy of last year. Right? Right? Welcome back to Motorsport 101. Hey everybody, welcome to episode 566 of Motorsport 101. I'm your friendly neighborhood host, Dre Harrison. Glad you could join us on this bumper edition and season finale, I suppose, of season preview season. And this is the big one, the main event, the one you've all been waiting for. It's Formula One and the 2025 season. And weirdly, quite possibly the series we had the most amount of enthusiasm for going into it, given how the bikes and how IndyCars was a little bit messy at the end of their respective 2024s. And we weren't exactly, upbeat about it. At least F1 could say they weren't dull last year, if nothing else. So here we are, a week and change away from the 2025 Formula One season, and we're going to try and make sense of it all, including a special guest, which I'll talk about a little bit more towards the back end of the show. But also, just to giving you a heads up, we'll also be covering MotoGP and IndyCar season openers at Thailand and St. Petersburg, respectively, next week. The way we had to arrange this because of our guest meant this had to take priority. Oh no, we did an F1 podcast first. Sue us. Don't worry. Just a one-off.
Come on, if you've seen the races, you'll imagine how I'm going to react to both of them. Come on, You've been listening to the show long enough.
There's a chance I may not be on those shows, and you know how I'm going to react to them.
Yes, exactly. We
he did it again.
Yeah,
yes.
Ricky Stenhouse Jr. wrecked the field again. Now, this is exactly what you were here for.
You say that Ross Chastain capped Chase Elliott in a cornfield on lap one.
Oh, good old NASCAR. Good old NASCAR. As you can probably guess, I am joined by my esteemed colleagues once again, Mr. Cameron Buckley. Hello, Cameron.
I don't care about any of this. After what happened in MotoGP, I don't have to care about any of this. I am eating good.
Cam,
for foreseeable future.
Just sit down. Just sit down, close your eyes, turn around, think about the bikes. Think about the bikes.
Oh, it's so good.
Don't think about the Honda, just think about the bikes.
No, I can think about the Honda. They went from being like me ranting for an hour about how bad they were last year to like mid. This is a win for us.
Genuine midfielders, Honda.
They were like legitimately the third best manufacturer in Buriram. I don't know what that says about Yamaha and KTM, but here we are.
Oh, yeah. We had Ryan Eric King on for next week's show.
But we do have RJ O'Connell. How are you, sir?
Good. I'm going to Sebring next week. This is the first time I'm getting on an airplane after recent events, and boy, howdy, I feel very nervous. I sure
do you know if it's going to be a Boeing or not?
I know it's going to be an Airbus. I know both flights are going to be on Airbuses.
Your percentage has gone up.
Yeah, but I don't want to get on the spot. I just want to talk about Formula One, which we have a loaded show. So let's get into the places where you can find us elsewhere on this internet, Dre.
Yes, indeed. Right. Basically, you can find us real quick. Our website, motorsport101.com. Please do check us out on there for all of the deets, and including all three Haters Guide editions and my preseason previews for all three of the major series are all up on there now by the time this goes out.
Potentially an Appreciator's Guide, which you may see by the time this episode goes out or earlier.
If you're a fan of Super Formula, do stick around, is what I would say. There'll be more on that as well, including full reviews of MotoGP in Thailand and IndyCar in St. Pete. They are back, is all that I need to say in regards to that. You can also follow us on Patreon, patreon.com/motorsport101 if you have to financially back us, you can. $5 gets you early access to all of our episodes and written content as well. I put sneak peeks of the written stuff on there as well, and occasionally just full episodes if you're a backer at any level. But $5 will get you guaranteed to be in for everything. You can upgrade to the $10 level to get Supporters Club access to this Discord server. You can listen to these episodes live as they are being recorded. This one was on the house because of our special guest, which I'll talk about a little bit more later on as well. But shout out to Kira, Raptor, Emma, Jason, Max, all in here. I hope you guys are enjoying the show. And our special guest, again, well, it was a very, very fun time indeed. And shout out to our new Patreon backer, Ferglin, as well. Thank you, Ferglin, for backing us. Very much appreciated. And for Kira for upping their pledge so that we could get another person into the supporters club on their behalf. And you probably know them on Instagram, Rory Talks Motorsport, Mr. Meme Lord himself. We love Rory. Thank you guys for your ongoing support. Much appreciated.
One of these days, we're going to get Chase Richardson on this podcast, Patreon Roll of Honor, and then we're going to have 50 of them.
I think we really need to get Flacco 811 on here.
Oh, man. He's not ready to deal with us and our motorsport related hot takes. No, that's.
I think we need to get well, I can think of a few people that I don't want on the podcast Patreon Roll of Honor.
Nico Harrison.
We already have the Harrison quota already.
What's that to you?
Not as dead as Nico Harrison is to the city of Dallas.
Also fair. Again, you can also follow us on Blue Sky, respectively. All of us are on there. I'm a Dre Harrison, RJ's RJ O'Connell, and Cam's at C Buckley 917. Just yank out the valves. You can't miss him. He's literally too angry to die. And of course, Motorsport 101 itself is on bad Twitter at Motorsport_101 and on Instagram at Motorsport101pod. You can check us out on there. Right, that'll just about do it. Let's get into our Formula One 2025 season preview.
Why don't we start with our 2025 Formula One calendar, which begins next week, March 16th, in Australia. Thank goodness, tradition restored. And this is the first in a long-ass calendar, 24 races. China's the following week, March 23rd in Shanghai. No Zhou Guan Yu racing unless somebody has a toaster dropped in their bathtub. April 6th, we go to Suzuka for the Japanese Grand Prix. Then the week after that, we fly to Bahrain for the Bahrain Grand Prix and Secure. And the week after that, we got our first triple header. Jeddah, Saudi Arabia, April 20th. There's a deep irony to that. And then we head to America for the first 3 American rounds. No, we have not had to sign authorized neutral agreements renouncing ourselves from the country yet. It's the Miami Grand Prix on May the 4th. Then we go to Imola for what could be the last Imola round on May 18th in Emilia-Romagna. Then following that is the Monaco Grand Prix, now with 2 pit stops on May 25th. After that, on June 1st, Spanish Grand Prix at Barcelona could be one of the last, not the last, at that venue. Then we go to Canada, Montreal, June 15th for the Canadian Grand Prix. I love that venue. I sure hope I can enter the country by then. Followed by the Austrian Grand Prix on June 29th at Spielberg at the Red Bull Ring. Then the granddaddy of them all, at least in the UK market, the British Grand Prix at Silverstone on July the 6th, which leads us to the Belgian Grand Prix at Spa-Francorchamps on July 27th. This could be the last one for at least a little bit. One of the last ones. I don't like it.
Let's put it to you this way. They signed a 6-year extension, but they've only got Grand Prix for 4 of them. Which says to me that's the first sign of calendar rotation.
Personally, I'm disgusted. I'm appalled.
Yeah, I feel you, brother.
I'm not here for it.
I feel you, brother. Speaking of disgusting and appalled, August 3rd, the Hungarian Grand Prix at the Hungaroring in Budapest. Then we have our summer break before we resume on August 31st with the Dutch Grand Prix at Zandvoort, which could be one of the last at that venue. September 7th, the Italian Grand Prix at Monza. Let me some Monza. Then we go to Azerbaijan, the Baku City Circuit on September 21st. Followed up by the Singapore Grand Prix at Marina Bay on October 5th. And then our second American round, the United States Grand Prix at Circuit of the Americas, October 19th. Always a fun time. But there's no time to spare because the next week, it's the Mexican Grand Prix at the Autodromo Hermanos Rodriguez on October 26th. The Brazilian Grand Prix at Sao Paulo's Interlagos Circuit on November 9th. The Saturday night, but not as late in the night, Las Vegas Grand Prix on November 22nd. Again, that is a Saturday, and then it's straight over to Qatar at Lusail Circuit on November 30th for the penultimate round before we wrap things up at Yas Marina Circuit for the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix on December 7th. Another giant-ass calendar, Dre, and of course, that includes sprints, China, Miami, Belgium, USGP, Brazil, and Qatar.
Largely unchanged sprint schedule, just a one change, I believe, compared to the 6 we had last year, that Belgium is a sprint race again. The other 5, I think, are retained from last year's selection of sprints. So clearly F1 has their favourites for that format where that's concerned. Don't have any huge problem with any of them as sprints. It depends whether you like the format or not. And I'm not turning over that stone again. We've been here for half a decade now. Either you like the sprints or you don't. Get over it. But I mean, there's not much to say that hasn't already been said. It's 24 races. It's front loaded with a lot of triple. There's 2 triple headers in the first third of the season, which is just crazy. Yeah, that's we've got friggin'. Japan, Bahrain, Saudi Arabia, and then Italy, Monaco, Spain as triple headers in the first 9 rounds of the year. So
yeah, at least the Italy, Monaco, Spain one is not so bad travel-wise, but then you go Bahrain, Saudi Arabia, Miami. That's a transatlantic flight right there.
Not fun. And we still insist on having an 8,000-kilometer round trip between the USA and Qatar going into the end of November. Why? Like, for what? For who? I know Qatar's kind of got to be there due to climate reasons, but having that alongside Vegas in November is just ridiculous to me. They've put this together with travel in mind, and yet, despite all that, you've got that ugly-ass round trip at the end of the year when everybody's already tired and wrecked as shit. I don't like it, personally, but the rest of it is pretty straightforward. As mentioned, Belgium is, for all intents and purposes, now a rotational round. They've got Grand Prix guaranteed until 2028, I want to say, or 27.
Yeah.
But then after that, it's going to be rotating with something else. Could be the Netherlands. Their last race is in 2026. We'll have to wait and see if there's a new deal on the table for them, or it could be something else. We'll have to wait and see how that plays out. Kieran in the chat asks, why can't we do what MotoGP does and divide those last triple headers into 3 double headers? Because fuck you, that's why. Formula One does not give a shit about its human element beyond, well, okay, we won't give you more than 24. That's our compromise.
Yeah, they actually found a limit where it's like, man, this is too many races. And you know how crazy it is? Where everything from like association football to college football is just like, how can we have more?
Yeah. It's ridiculous. I mean, we're looking at an NFL that could be, there's almost certainly going to be 18 games in the next couple of years.
And we will watch every single week of
every down.
Potentially commercial free for 7 hours in every play. Who knows? Flexi wings will have their durability cut down by 33% by the time we roll around to the Spanish Grand Prix. In case you had any concerns that your favorite team, or rather your least favorite team, is using them, we will have multiple race directors returning in 2025. I wonder what happened to our one single solitary race director that we've had in recent years. Couldn't think about it.
Well,
he was beaten into the sun.
Well, we sent him a beehive, but it was full of killer bees, so that was that.
We wanted the bees to be non-lethal. There will be no fastest lap purple football. That bonus point has been scrapped for the year, so no 26-point races. And, of course, the very, very popular swearing ban handed down by FIA President Mohammed bin Sulayem, now in effect. 40 grand for your first offense, ×2 and ×3 mults for second and third offenses, 2 years. And if you reach a third offense, you could get a 1-month ban. It's great. I love it. I love doing this in a sport that is so high strung, inherently so.
Now, I need to make this clear. This is press conferences only. A lot of people have exaggerated this rule where it talks about, oh, they can't swear in the cars. I mean, I joked about this before, the F1 75. Jack Whitehall interviewing Gordon Ramsay and Ramsay saying, let the drivers be them, was such low-hanging fruit. I might as well have just pulled my pants down and said, have a reach around, sir, at that point, because it was just, it was such...
Easiest soundbite you could possibly get.
Right, it was just so easy. Look, listen, they could still swear inside the car, as long as
Absolutely.
it's not a slur, obviously, Yuki. But the press conferences, it was confirmed by my colleagues at Autosport that swearing is now deemed as misconduct. And under the new FIA rules, it is a €10,000 fine for misconduct, multiplied by 4 because it's Formula One. It's a sliding scale depending on where you are on the FIA's pyramid of championships. F1 is in its own separate tier with a ×4 multiplier. It's like playing into the family on Molatro. It's spicy, but not in the way you're hoping for.
I'm now playing the game for the first time for real after my girlfriend bought it for me, and I have to say I thank you, Dre, for all of your insight in like the months before I actually started picking this up, because otherwise I wouldn't know what the fuck to do.
Yeah, now that there's a multiplayer mod, I'm like, oh, I might have to pick this up so I can play with y'all in the Discord.
You are not ready to take on me in multiplayer Molatro.
This could get as potentially toxic as Mario Party.
Honestly,
I don't know, man.
You know, I've heard that before.
For the good of everybody in the server, I am never installing that mod. Like it's a comfort for everybody else involved. I am too competitive a person for that, and it would bring out the worst in me. It's for the best, I promise you. Yeah, basically, as RJ alluded to, it is double the money for a second offence and triple for a third offence. These fines do stack. The third offence also carries a 1-month ban, which could be anywhere from 0 to 3 F1 races, depending on where this ban plays out. Again, it all depends on the calendar and where it happens, of course. So it could be a sliding scale, but
it's just so silly, man.
I mean, don't get me wrong. This is not a huge issue. I've said this as a hot take on Twitch. We had 100 press conferences in Formula One last year. 2 of them had bad language. This really isn't an issue, in my opinion. However, I also think that Mohammed Ben Sulayem's reaction to this has been completely over the top.
Yeah.
Like, both sides of the argument is stupid. Yeah, you probably shouldn't swear on a live broadcast that the kids can watch.
Yeah.
You are never going to be Ofcom. They complain for a reason. You want to be a family show. You don't ever want to exclude people from watching your products. You are not winning that fight. So don't swear in a press conference. However, fining somebody €40,000 for that is ridiculous.
Yeah, I can tell you, some of those drivers at the back of the grid, they ain't making that much money in salary compared to what you might think.
Exactly.
In fact, a lot of them are probably paying more to drive that car than they take in on retainer.
Exactly. That take-home pay is low 6 figures. So to get fined, I mean, if you do it 3 times in 2 years, that is €240,000 in fines.
Shoo-wee.
That's a lot of Xboxes.
That is a lot of Xboxes, and I don't think anybody wants that. Speaking of the back markers, let's get into the teams. And first up, we have, as we go in reverse championship order, as we traditionally do on this show, Kick Sauber. So it's totally still not Audi yet. In their seats, number 27, Nico Hülkenberg, who was 11th in the championship last year. He'll be joined by number 5 and a new rookie, Gabriel Bortoleto, last year's Formula 2 champion.
They were bad in testing, and I know we are not supposed to read too much into testing results, but this is one of those where you just know, yeah, this is not good. You know, I'm going to throw out more sporting analogies. These are the Arizona Coyotes playing in a 5,000-seat college arena until they get moved to Salt Lake City. This is the Montreal Expos splitting time between Montreal and Puerto Rico until they get moved to DC. This is the vibe of Kick Sauber until they become Audi. Do not expect much hope here. This is all that Nico Hülkenberg is leveraging on. He's leveraging this seat to go down the grid for his one last shot at a factory drive in F1. And then there's Gabriel Bortoleto, who we know is good. Is he a good system quarterback, or is he good?
Yeah, I mean, look, they didn't even get the blend on their livery right. I mean, what about what are they going to do for the car?
Yeah, I think the blend would be better if they just got rid of all the steak and kick bullshit on the car, and I won't move off this position because that's a terrible company that enables the worst out of people online.
And that might be the best thing about this team's car. They look like junk in testing. I mean, just you can't really go off of testing times, but you can go off of car behavior. And read any website that covers F1. They pretty much universally pan this thing anytime it was out on track. It just looks like hard work.
Yeah, I was on, this is a bit of a shameless plug, so forgive me, but I was producing the James Allen F1 podcast as part of my job. Today, it was a journalism roundtable of James Allen, Jake Boxall-Legg from Autosport, Roberto Cicero from the Italian side of Motorsport.com, and Ronald Vording from the Dutch team of Motorsport.com. Great journos. The one thing they all unanimously agreed on, Sauber is stone dead last.
Yeah.
But this might be a tank job. They might be trusting the process to try and get as much wind tunnel time for next year. And that's probably the right thing to do as a team in their situation. But actually seeing that play out on track, it was not so good last year. And I think they are in an even bigger hole this year. The one thing that they can hang their hat on is that they do have two. Like, Nico Hülkenberg is absolutely proven quality. He was superb last year.
He's an outside contender for driver of the year from us.
He's outstanding.
He's my midfield driver of the year without a question. He did great work for Haas and was instrumental in getting them back up the grid after years in the doldrums. And Bortoleto, incoming F2 champion, really solid up to this point.
Yeah.
I just don't think either of them have anything like a tool to actually showcase their talents.
Yeah,
I was going to make that point as well, that, if there's one thing the journos who did go to Bahrain tell me, they were all impressed with Gabriel Bortoleto. They all said he took to the car very quickly, very good at giving feedback to the engineers. Racer's brain was the phrase that I heard thrown around a couple of times in regards to Bortoleto. He's clearly a talent. Sauber loves him and loves what he can do in a simulator and in terms of what he's able to give back to the team. Yeah. Very much like an Ollie Behrman type. I think there's a lot of positives coming with Bortoleto. I just fear that he's not in the right team to showcase that.
Yeah, it's going to be tough for him, but I will say I appreciate that because I know a lot of people are cynical about the way that the hot dogs are made in Formula 2, but this is F1 now, and if they're giving you these positive evaluations like that, then you know it ain't bullshit.
No.
Right. Both of these things can be true. But yeah, I just don't really know what else to say about Sauber. I mean, they scored everything in their one race last year with Joe. The pit stops, I guess, will be better this year. Let's hope.
Yeah, they can't be much worse.
Got their ish together.
They've got LEDs on their wheel guns now. They're cool as shit. Hopefully that will help them actually get a reliable under 2.5 second stops next year.
Yeah.
Oh boy, it's only like they just caught up to everyone else.
But colors, Cam. Colors.
Yeah, I will say I might pick them to go scoreless this year. I really might.
There is definitely a chance that they go scoreless on the
year. Rough.
Do you want to improve the vibes? Let's go to Williams because Alex Albon is still here. He's 12th in the championship. They were big regression candidates, yes, but overall, another solid season for Alex Albon. And of course, the big storyline of Williams, somehow, in defiance of God's will, they got Carlos Sainz Jr. from Ferrari.
How?
Logan Sargent is gone. Franco Colapinto is elsewhere, but you got Carlos Sainz.
The signs were all there.
Now, I know we can't look at Carlos Sainz leading the leaderboards and testing and think, oh yeah, they're going to win the championship. But that can't be nothing, right?
Well, I'll tell you this. they were actually already faster than they were at the start of last year. The lap times that they were setting were faster than their qualifying times. And the car looked all right trackside. Yep. Like it's doing what the drivers are telling it to do, which is not something we could say about the Williams for the majority of 2024.
Yeah. Their car was a mess last year. Look, there were multiple tubs written off at Williams last year, and Alex Albon had earned the benefit of the doubt from how good his 2023 had been, where we're going, hang on a minute. I mean, Val's let the cat out of the bag in Imola that they were 15 kilos overweight to start the year, and that's what pegged back year two of what I like to call the James Vowles revolution down at Grove. Every time they interview James Vowles about this, and Vowles is a lovely man. I've interviewed him before myself. He's a great dude. But he can't help but talk about this is the revolution, this is the process, this is us doing all we have to do to turn into winners.
He only seems to speak in brand activations.
He really does. And I think he's right. Apparently, here's a fun little story I can now share in a bit more detail now. I don't know if anybody caught him saying, come on, London, give it up during F1 75 Live, right, when he was announcing the new Williams and whatnot. Apparently, he was trained by Steve Jones to let loose a little bit more. Steve Jones' Channel 4's F1 anchor when they have the highlights and the occasional live race here and there. So Vowles is trying to actively loosen up, which I think is hilarious.
Don't talk like a walking LinkedIn profile. Give us a little bit of sensual LinkedIn profile.
Spice. You spiced your way into getting Carlos Sainz in your team. You've clearly got something.
Yeah. I mean, how good does Williams have to be to convince Carlos Sainz not to exercise an out on his contract?
Top 6, you'd think, right?
Yeah, I'd say be knocking on the door of points consistently.
Yeah, if you're in the points every other weekend, maybe 50 to 80 on the year in that sort of ballpark, that's a pretty good year.
And then on the opposite side, what does success look like for Alex Albon? Because I know a lot of people were, and we probably talked about this on review shows, but it's just I feel like a lot of people were quick to look at how good Franco Colapinto does when he was good and think, man, Alex Albon was overrated all this time.
Yeah, and then Colapinto's run kind of got derailed a little bit towards the end there. It goes to show you it's not as simple as you're only ever as good as your last weekend, which is kind of the problem with Formula One as a sport and how we evaluate it in general. Albon is clearly good. He has done a magnitude of great things with that team. He's earned the right to have this opportunity. And there is few better yardsticks than Carlos Sainz. He's a top 6 driver in the world. He was at his best. At Carlos's very best, he was beating Charles Leclerc straight up. Yep. That is something you don't do very often. He is capable of competing at the very highest level. This is going to be a fascinating matchup for Albon as to just where he sits alongside a genuinely elite level driver. If he can keep it, if it's close, that's as good as a win for Albon as far as I'm concerned. Even if he's slightly on the losing side of the head-to-heads, I think you take that all day long.
Yeah,
overall, it means Williams is a consistent team with 2 fast drivers who could both score good points.
Yeah.
Isn't that what the aim here?
Yeah. Look, for us media people and us punters, the head-to-head battles are nice, but for the constructors who works at these teams, it's all about getting points and securing that prize money.
And that's Williams has not had 2 consistent point scorers in a long, long, long time.
Yeah.
The last time they had 2 decent scorers was when Sergei Sorokin was driving for this team. Before the pandemic.
Okay, that 2018 car wasn't doing that. I would say 2017 when it was Massa and Stroll.
Massa and Stroll, good lord. Yeah, you're probably right.
18-year-old Lance Stroll, and he had upside and potential. Golly, I miss those days. Speaking of missing those days, I want to talk about a team that is based in Faenza. I used to cheer for a team based in Faenza, and I still kind of do, except they now look different. It's Visa Cash App Racing Bulls. Yuki Tsunoda is back for his 5th season in Faenza. He was 12th in points last year, now joined by the close runner-up in the aforementioned Formula 2 Championship, Isaac Hadjar, the newest out of the Red Bull Junior Team system. The car is white now. That's good.
Yay!
But
It's a nice looking race car.
And I'll elaborate here later on the podcast, but this is the Racing Bulls Anxiety Cup because it's guaranteed like whoever loses this head-to-head battle, whoever doesn't come out particularly impressive is going to get snapped up by an Arvid Lindblad-sized hype train.
That's the overwhelming feeling coming out of that camp heading towards this season, is that Arvid Lindblad is getting all the hype and attention. For those who don't know, everybody thought the FIA bending the rules on the super license for 17-year-olds was down to Kimi Antonelli. It wasn't that. It was Red Bull pushing for Arvid Lindblad to potentially break the rules and have one as a 17-year-old, depending on how well his F3 season turned out. Turns out he kind of bottled it towards the end of the F3 season, had a few bad days, and ended up finishing 4th overall in the end. He's in F2 this year, but allegedly, according to the race, they've already reported that Lindblad will get multiple FP1s this year, including the 2-year-old car program as well, which Red Bull generally does not do because they think it's too expensive normally to justify running old Honda tech. So, if Lindblad's getting this kind of attention, it says to me anything resembling a decent F2 year, and Lindblad's getting a seat next year.
Yeah, I mean, this is also crossroads year for Sunoco, even in a vacuum, because this is Red Bull's last year with Honda engines in the back of the 2 teams that they own. And we all know Yuki Tsunoda and Honda have been tight going back to his days as a Formula 4 driver who had just been a finalist for the Suzuka Racing School Formula Scholarship, which was about 10 years ago. I feel ancient now.
Yeah, thanks. All my bones are now touching one another. Yeah, we'll say thus far, my favorite looking car in the grid. I think the white and blue looks excellent.
It's going to look so good.
It looks fine in testing.
Cool.
But they didn't look anything special, and it feels like it's another year of, well, how good will they actually be?
Mm-hmm.
It looks a little bit more. Oh, Luna has left the room. It looks a little bit more like last year's Red Bull, more than last year's RB looked like the previous year's Red Bull. And we'll see how that translates. I just feel like no matter what Yuki Tsunoda does, he's probably out of a drive at the end of the year. Well, and that's going to be really, really aggravating.
I don't know, man, because like Isaac Hadjar is also feeling like he's in a no-win situation because we know he's not even the number 1 prize of the Red Bull Junior team at this point. Like,
all the vibes are bad here.
Yeah,
what should be a pretty good driver lineup,
like
with a pretty good technical base behind it.
Okay, Dre, what chance does Isaac Hadjar have to stick around and not be a one-and-done driver in the sport?
It might be a Casey Stoner sort of deal when he retired from Honda in 2012, when they might be shoving Tsunoda out of the door anyway because of the lack of Honda financial backing, and that might be what keeps Hadjar in the seat by default. I don't think there's another Red Bull hotshot they're going to just plug into there anytime soon.
Other than the guy we talked about.
Exactly.
Yeah, well, I would be wondering if they dump both drivers. I don't even know who they get in the second seat, but I don't know.
It depends. I mean, Red Bull's kind of changed their attitude towards the second team, where it's more of a sister team now than a straight-up junior team. I mean, we had a year and change of Daniel Ricciardo.
Yeah, that ain't no junior.
Yeah, that ain't no junior no more. So if they're treating it more as a straight-up F1 team, they can have the pick and choose of anybody on the market, and that includes maybe someone outside of F1 at the moment. Valtteri Bottas, maybe Sergio Perez, maybe if he still wants to drive. But I mean, you got any better ideas right now?
There's a 18-year-old NASCAR prospect who just signed a Red Bull sponsorship deal named Connor Zilish.
Ooh, spicy.
I don't think that will actually happen. I think it's more likely he takes
Van Gisbergen.
I think it's more likely Zilish takes over. Alex Bowman's right at Hendrick, or Daniel Suarez is at Trackhouse. Which one is it? We'll never know, and that's not this podcast.
Exactly.
I've just seen I've just seen the MotoGP news. We'll save that for later.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Holy crap.
All I'm saying is like it's pretty big. But let's we brought the vibes down. Now let's bring it back up because Haas F1 team is coming off its second best season ever under Ayao Komatsu's leadership with the Toyota Gazoo Racing partnership. They are not back in Formula One. Please stop telling us they are. And they've reshuffled the decks. Esteban Ocon is the new ace driver. He was 14th in the championship at Alpine in all but one race last season. And Oliver Behrman, who was 18th in the standings after relief drives at Ferrari and Haas, the super rookie, gets his first full season. He, of course, was a F2 title contender in 2023. I love the vibes, but I've also seen what happened the last time Haas had its best season ever, and then thanks to one large bearded man peddling bullshit energy drinks, it all came crashing down again.
That's the thing with Haas, right? We all had this preconceived notion of them after preseason last year, is they just don't look that interesting. I think we all had them penciled in for worst or joint worst, and then they have, on vibes, probably their best season ever, and objectively their second best season, best one since 2018. So I think the driver lineup is solid. I think Esteban Ocon is going to benefit quite a bit from a change of scenery.
Absolutely.
Flavio Briatore not like putting stinky cheese in his air conditioning every night, shutting off his Wi-Fi, taking the keys to his car, and so on. I think Ocon is so much better than what he got to show last year at Alpine.
Yeah, I agree. I've always been a big believer. Like, am I on the train of like Esteban Ocon will be a world champion? No. But is he a perfect driver for this sort of team that can lead them to consistent point scoring finishes, potentially Haas's first podium? Absolutely, man.
It is a great fit for a guy that's had, in my opinion, a wrongful reputation of being a home wrecker. I've never understood where that's come from with Esteban Ocon. I think he's had such a bad rap for that over the years. And off the back of conjecture and rumours and fear-mongering, I think that he's a very, very good driver. Probably the most underappreciated driver in Formula One. I know it's kind of a moniker that gets thrown around a lot, but I think that really does genuinely apply to Esteban. He's been a damn good driver in every team he's ever driven for in F1. The top opportunity has never quite landed because I think he's the sort of guy that's always the number two option when it comes to these sorts of decisions. But Ocon is a really good pair of hands, and this is a guy that at his very best was trading blows with Fernando Alonso. That's a damn good driver, an excellent leader for this newly revamped Haas team. And Ollie Behrman's a stud. Ollie Behrman was winning Formula 2 races at 17 years of age. I ignore last year.
Super sub last year for Ferrari.
And Haas.
Ollie Behrman walked into Haas last year and beat Nico Hülkenberg in Baku straight up.
That's crazy.
Yeah. And with the year that Hülkenberg had, after we just praised him nonstop through the only good thing about Sauber going into this year. Behrman has shown up to this point that he is legit. I am really curious to see how Haas approaches this season because we know what they did with the last big regulation reset, i.e., they basically didn't do anything in 2021. The car was the 2020 car with the new Ferrari engine and a Dremel tool to the floor.
Yeah.
I'm wondering, I think how they run their season is going to very much depend on how they hit the ground running, whether they maintain to try and get some of the prize money into that team, or whether they kind of cut things off and go straight into 2026 all in.
It's a fascinating dilemma because under Steiner, they tried that. They tried to trust the process into for 21 and 2022, and it did not work as planned. Now it's Ayao Komatsu's Haas F1 team, and they're profitable for the first time. They're still the smallest team in F1 by a significant size, and I feel like this is a team where like 5th, 6th is their ceiling, but it's so much better than what it was like a couple years ago when at their worst we were thinking Haas should be
they were the worst team in F1 and had produced maybe the worst F1 car we had seen in the last decade.
Putting the sport into disrepute allegations
multiple times.
Yeah.
I'd add. Other than the 2019 Williams, of course. But like at the same time with Haas, they're also sharing less with Ferrari this year. One, because of the partnership with Toyota, they're offloading some of that development workload over to Toyota Gazoo, as Toyota, under these current hypercar rules, doesn't need to produce a new aero kit every 3 races. Those days are long gone in the top flight of sports car racing. But also, Ferrari has made some changes that they are not sharing. So they're going it more alone than they have up to, I think, any point since 2016. It's going to be fascinating.
Yeah. And Ayakimatsu's approach compared to Gunther Steiner is going to be one of the midfield stories that I think won't get anywhere near as much traction as it should, but could be very interesting depending on how that plays out. Alpine, next on the list.
Oh my God. Should we? Look, we will start the year with Pierre Gasly, who was 10, and rookie Jack Doohan coming into the sport after some time as the reserve driver at Alpine. He'd done some F2 and F3, was part of the
God bless this mess.
But there was also Franco Colapinto-sized elephant in the room. Look, they had a messy year. We know they're not building engines anymore after 2025. Flavio Briatore has somehow backdoored his way out of a lifetime ban and a commuted sentence to practically run the team now. Multiple senior staff have resigned. Esteban Ocon was pushed out. Oh, man, this is so volatile.
Well, it's a good thing that Alpine had such a great chassis last year that they're retaining that one for this year.
Oh.
You can't write this stuff with Alpine anymore. In fairness, that car, just the car, because never the engine. There's a very good reason, unfortunately, that this is their last year as a factory entity. And the last year with a French F1 engine. And God, when was the last time that either Renault or Mechachrome wasn't building something for F1?
It's been ages.
Late 80s. Late 80s when Renault returned to the sport after that gap year where there was no turbo. God, that feels weird. The car wasn't so bad to finish the end of last year.
No.
Gasly, other than when the engine exploded from revving too high in Las Vegas, it was on the up. Everything else about this team...
They got so lucky at Sao Paulo. Like, I don't blame them. You have an opportunity, you seize the hell out of it. They got second and third in Brazil. Like, that saved their season for just one weekend.
It was a $13 million double podium in terms of prize money. Like, it was to Alpine, that was absolutely priceless. It was a season saver by all accounts. And to be fair to Alpine, they were a lot stronger at the end of last year compared to the first half, where Gasly was regularly
first half. They had the worst car in the sport.
Yeah.
First half, they were the laughing stock. They, as a F factory entity, they were throwing hands with Sauber, who were having half-minute pit stops.
Yeah. Alpine, to their credit, did bounce back to the point where they were probably the 5th best team in Formula One by the time the year was over. That is some optimism to genuinely to have in that camp. It's classic Alpine. The engine is shit, but the rest of the car ain't half bad. It's got a very good chassis. It's a very drivable car. Pierre Gasly drove very well to close out 2024. They've got something here. Now the goal is clearly for me as an Alpine guy is get back into the top 5. You should be threatening Aston Martin for a top 5 spot this year. That could hit the ground running like you did at the end of last year and try and push for a top 5 finish.
Yeah.
Like, get back to where you were at 3 years ago when you were knocking on the door of the big 4.
And that's going to be the thing here, because that's going to require points contributions from both drivers. But the question is, by the end of this season, hell, by Monaco, who is Pierre Gasly's teammate going to be? Is it going to be Jack Doohan still, or is it going to be Franco Colapinto?
The vibes are off. The omen is bad. I don't see what Jack Doohan can do to dissuade Flavio from canning him.
He can only do the best to keep himself in the shop window so that another team can give him a chance. Man, it is not looking good for him to stick around. I didn't hate the hire at the time that they made it. We just didn't expect Franco Colapinto to be so good, so fast, that he is even more irresistible to a potential F1 employer, including this one.
Exactly. It's, for me, in the way I see it, Alpine needs to be top 5. I feel sorry for Jack Doohan because he's been put in what I like to call the Kobayashi Maru. He's been put in the unwinnable situation, because how are you supposed to compete with Pierre Gasly as a rookie when Gasly has over 150 Grand Prix to his name and is a top 10 driver in the sport at his very best? Like, if you're Jack Doohan, who isn't an A-plus prospect coming out of F2,
I'd say he's a solid B, but everyone says.
Yeah, he's a solid B, but B doesn't cut it no more in this damn sport, and that's the problem. And if you're Jack Doohan, to quote Rory Breaker, you're going to have to work very hard to stay alive here, Jack. And that's the problem that I think he's in right now. Like, what would be impressive? What, be within 2 temps? Would that be enough for him to keep his job? Because you don't put Franco Colapinto on a 5-year deal as a reserve. We all know what the score is there, right? Come on now.
Yeah, the only person that was getting deals like that to be a reserve driver was my guy Luca Badoer, and those days are long in the past. And I know Franco Colapinto isn't spending a decade just puttering around the Alpine test track, wherever that may be.
Yeah, good luck to them. Aston Martin,
9th in the championship was Fernando Alonso. He's back. 14th in the championship with Lance Stroll. He's back whether you want him or not. But the big thing is they got Adrian Newey. They've got Adrian Newey. Drake, they got Adrian Newey.
And they got Adrian Newey.
And they're paying him almost £1 per second at Aston Martin.
Golly.
The
immune from inflation contract.
And yeah, in other words, if this was a pound coin, I could drop it from my hand right now and Adrian Newey has made it back before it hits the ground. That's how much money he's making.
That's the good news. And I think it's pretty good news that you've retained Fernando Alonso for the short-term future. The bad news is the running theme of the preseason was that it's rumored that Aston Martin are hiding their pace. Unfortunately, they forgot where they hid it.
Bro's got hidden talent. Keep it hidden.
They had a sum of like 5 different floors last year. None of them made the car faster. They've done a major redesign of much of this car this year. Thus far, it has not gone faster.
Yeah, there was a lot. I mean, again, overriding consensus that I was picking up from Autosport being in Bahrain for the test was, hey, Aston Martin looked good. And then on the final day, it was, oh, no, hang on, Aston Martin don't look so good. This is...
You good?
Yeah.
Text back. Okay. Oh, you not good.
Yeah, down bad more than Padua Award in St. Petersburg last week. Just rough out here. Yeah, it wasn't great. I mean, this is a team that has been in development hell for the last 2 years. Like where they opened up this regulation period, and yeah, they started out fantastic, but they've never been able to make their quick car faster. Well, the fuel has passed them by.
They started off like junk. They started off awful in 22. Redesigned the car as a quote-unquote green bull. They carried that into 23. 23, they had Monaco on a silver platter and threw it away to at least get one in the win column.
That was the Fernando Alonso comeback win. It really was. That was the one right there.
Yeah.
You put him on the intermediate straight away, and Alonso wins that race. I'm dead certain of it.
Yeah. Only denied by Max Verstappen finishing the story in Q3. Here's the thing. Ever since Mercedes and Ferrari started to get their shit back together in the second half of 23, and then McLaren leaped the entire queue on everyone twice, Aston are just there.
Yeah.
And they throw development at the car, and they're still there. And then they fire their primary head of development, Dan Fallows, who was like, his whole thing was getting out from under Adrian Newey's shadow.
Yeah, now he's been stuffed in a very nice Aston Martin emblazoned locker.
Oh, contrast stitched leather in that locker as well.
It's beautiful.
I just don't know what to think of Aston Martin, nor do I know how. Like, obviously, the focus is 26 because Adrian Newey, of course, with gardening leave and everything, he only actually just started at Aston this
week.
Yeah, so
none of his influence is going to be felt in this car until very late in this season, if not next.
Good point from Max in the chat as well. They lost the Enrico Cardile court case as well. Ferrari actually sued Aston Martin over the deal because apparently Enrico Cardile, their new chief technical officer, was already breaking the terms of their gardening leave agreement. Not great.
I don't know why Ferrari would sue. I mean, he spent years making shit Ferraris. You'd think they want him to go over there and make a shit Aston.
But here we are. So apparently Aston's been bending the rules already on this one, apparently, and they just lost a court case in Italy in regards to that.
And then, of course, the elephant in the room, they will be the Honda factory team next year, going into new power unit regulations, mind you, arguably the best engine manufacturer in the sport over the last 3 years in their wheelhouse, making engines just for them. Here's the thing. I don't think you bother with this year.
Do you think there's a temptation to have Newey have a look at this year's car and go, got any thoughts?
I think there is. I think there is, but I wouldn't spend big wind tunnel time on it because they're kind of right in the middle in terms of wind tunnel time because they keep finishing in the constructors right in the middle.
Yep.
But Works engine deal next year. Adrian Newey overseeing development and as shares in the team. Remember, he is now part owner of this team. Something that he was never extended over at Red Bull or famously at Williams. Just to see what you can pick out in the development, like in the development map, because something keeps going wrong with Aston where they have had piss poor correlation basically from the jump with this technical structure, because the 2023 car overperformed, and that sounds like a good thing, but it's actually not, because it means you don't know where you actually are, and they've never been able to develop it forward.
Yeah, you never want to have a batting average on balls in play that's higher than your actual batting average. I'm throwing in baseball references here, but that's kind of the thing that comes to mind. You don't want to massively overperform your expected goals so much to the point that nobody knows what you actually are. We know what the drivers are. Fernando Alonso is Fernando Alonso. Is he going to stick around until 2026? Who knows? Lance Stroll, we know he's sticking around until he decides he's had enough. And we just wonder, what version are we getting out of him this weekend? What version are we getting out of him this weekend?
Well, the way he ended last year was, what award did he win last year at the Motorsport 101 Awards, fellas?
So the Never Log Off Award for the time he logged
funniest thing for Lance's stroll into the gravel in Brazil. We know what Lance Stroll is.
This is year 9 of Lance Stroll.
We all know what Lance Stroll is as a driver. I'm sick of talking about it. But what I will say about Aston, just don't waste what you have.
Yep.
Because a lot of teams would kill to have Adrian Newey, factory Honda engines, and Fernando Alonso. You have every ingredient available to go kick some ass next year.
Yeah.
And on current evidence, I have no faith that they will.
And I know Lawrence Stroll will spend. He is not a cheap skinflint owner. He will spend money on this.
There is a rumor that he wants to throw Max Verstappen $8 billion contract, and that rumor has names behind it. $1 billion racing driver.
That's a third of Lawrence's worth.
Like, get Like, here's the thing about Lawrence Stroll. Say what you will about him. No one has ever accused him of being tight. He is prepared to spend whatever it takes to get his son a championship. You know, you got to give him his due for that. Would he be prepared to make Max Verstappen arguably the most paid athlete in sport if it brought them a championship? God knows. God knows. I don't think it's $1 billion because it would be
inconceivable. It would break the driver market.
It would be 8 times his market value because Mercedes openly admitted they offered Max 135 million quid this year to bring him in on like a 4-year contract, and Max turned him down. But he's already paying Adrian Newey more than any technical head has ever been paid in F1.
It's one of the highest paid people in the whole sport, driver or otherwise now. And it shares in the team. So really, that value is actually higher than what it is on the books.
Absolutely. Like, he's an Aston Martin shareholder. He has full creative license over the F1 team. And we're talking somewhere between 20 and 30 million quid a year, depending on who you ask.
Andy Cowell as well, the chief architect of the Mercedes Doom engine of 2014 and the old BMW V10s that used to drag Williams kicking and screaming to results they didn't deserve in the 2000s.
Uh-huh.
All of this is here. You have to do something with it eventually.
Yeah, you don't want to be like, God, think of any NBA super team that was formed. Was
the Philadelphia 76ers featuring Paul George.
Los Angeles Clippers featuring Kawhi Leonard. The Phoenix Suns featuring Kevin Durant. The Dallas Mavericks featuring Luka and Kyrie.
Well, as long as they don't trade Adrian Newey for like Nick Chester, the guy behind the Twin Nose Lotus, they won't bring the 10 curses of Egypt upon Silverstone.
No
like
kidding.
Happening in Dallas right now.
Jeez. We talked a little bit about correlation issues, and I guess it's time to crack our knuckles. And now we are into the big four of Formula One, and it starts with Mercedes, who does not have Lewis Hamilton. They have George Russell, sits in the championship last year, a race winner last year. We know that new Labor Woody is a damn good driver. And we also know that Andrea Kimi Antonelli, the rookie out of Formula 2, Formula Regional, Formula 4, he's been hyped up since he was coming out of karting. We know he's got talent. Dre, what do we make of this team?
I think they're low key a team in a very interesting place. This is life after Lewis. This is for the modern age of Mercedes beyond the Ross Brawn era. Lewis Hamilton is all they've ever known as the focal point of that team for Mercedes. In the Toto Wolff era, his first big move was bringing in Lewis Hamilton to replace a cooked Michael Schumacher. And after 12 years in that camp and an unprecedented amount of success, the greatest team and driver combo statistically that we've ever seen in F1, he's gone. Now, don't get me wrong. I think George Russell is a great driver. I think Russell is in a place now where he is at. There's no doubt in my mind left that he can spearhead an elite team because he's beaten Hamilton 2 out of the 3 years they were teammates together. Like, I have very little to question about Russell as a driver at this point. Is that enough? And what is Kimi? Because that's going to be the other interesting question. Like, because there's no right or wrong answer on this one, because the people that love Kimi adore him from his Frecker days, from his karting days, from his F4 days. Those people reckon he's Verstappen-esque.
Like, when Will Butson is putting you in an article about, like, here's who could drive an F1 in 2025, and, like, he nails it, but he actually undersells it because that article had him going to Williams.
Yeah. He's
kind of a big deal.
He was a golden karting prospect that went to single-seaters and immediately crushed it in Frecker at F4. His F2 season last year wasn't wonderful. He was 6th in the championship there last year, but the 2 races he did win have been the pouring rain at Silverstone and mixed conditions in Hungary. He was sensational.
We didn't even talk, and that's not even including like the pass up Blanchimont at Spa.
Oh yeah, like this kid has got bollocks. This kid has got some serious balls behind him. He is extremely talented. There's no doubt in my mind on that one. But how's that going to translate to a top-tier Formula One team straight away and George Russell as a teammate, a guy that has beaten the very best this sport has to offer?
Yeah, like Mercedes wants points out of Antonelli. Of course they want points. They want as many points as they can get on the board from both their drivers. How they get them, it doesn't really matter as long as they get that far up the standings, continue to win races. Like, for y'all, what does a successful first year for Antonelli look like? Does it go like 50-50 in qualifying, 50-50 in points, win a race, several podiums?
Oh, if he goes 50-50, pull your pants down and rub one out, because that would be a huge success.
Italy's not had a world champion in this series since Alberto Ascari. That's how you know it's been a while.
Yeah. And Mercedes are an interesting spot because this is the first time I will say in maybe the last 5 years, Mercedes actually looked like they had a really good preseason.
Did they fix the correlation?
I have no idea. What I will say, last year they looked like junk. 2023, they were optimistic to an extent, and Red Bull beat that out of them in a single race. In 2022, how's your spine? This is the first Mercedes. Mercedes gets my, quote, most interesting car of the preseason. That is not a euphemism for good. But I think they have a very interesting car.
Yeah.
And they look solid out on track. We've seen that before out of Mercedes.
Some of the pundits,
well in cool conditions.
Some of the pundits
very cool.
Yeah. Sorry, but go ahead. Some of the pundits have Merckx as high as second right now.
That would be quite the turnaround.
I would say maybe.
They like the overriding consensus that I got from the paddock in Bahrain was very tight between the next 3 teams we're going to talk about, and Mercedes being one of them.
Mm-hmm.
They are in the mix with Red Bull and Ferrari, which, if that's the case, that's pretty good.
Oh, it's good for fans because you want to see the big 4 neck and neck.
It's a lot better than what it was last year, where Mercedes opened the season and they were a distant 3rd to 4th best, basically until they binned their entire front wing design. And then suddenly the car was really good.
Yeah, sometimes 5th when the season started.
Yeah, they were actually behind Aston on occasion to start last year. What I will also say, though, they are one of 2 teams that are the most dependent on this grid on the flexible wings that are being canned after Spain. And that is going to be a huge factor that I don't think enough stock is being put into. I also think the FIA are incredibly stupid for having basically let it go all year, I think last year, so they could get a championship fight out of the season. And then saying that it was fine for this year, only to then go, well, actually, we're going to can them after Spain. When everyone really wants to go and develop their 26 cars.
Yeah, like my colleague JB Audible said, a lot of this is smoke in a teacup because we don't know what the guys are actually going to put on their cars when we get to Australia next week. Yeah. But it's still very bizarre that we're getting a technical regulation change a third of the way into the new season when you knew what was going on all through the previous year. You had ample time to draw a line in the sand on this issue, and you've chosen a halfway house on a huge technical regulation which had a huge influence on how 2024 played out. Yeah,
we got a title fight out of it. Because no one leaned further into that dark magic than McLaren.
Yeah.
Which we'll talk about. I think, low-key, first of all, I do expect Kimi to win a race this year. Just straight up.
You do?
I
Really?
don't actually think that's much of a hot take. I think that he'll sneak one. I think Russell could grab a couple if Mercedes are real. And we know the Mercedes is an absolute piss missile in cold conditions.
Mhm.
They need to have it not be that in medium temperature to hot conditions.
That's the thing. And you know what? You don't need a wind tunnel
You desperately need a wind tunnel to see this.
to see it.
Look,
Red-
Jordan F1 is now drowning in Ferrari hopium. Like that's going to make his life any better.
But that's not our concern. Red Bull Racing has the number one, the 4-time champion of the world, Max Verstappen. Some will tell you he's a 3-time champion of the world. We're just reading what it says on the stat sheet. And of course, Liam Lawson is here. He's another super rookie who's had 11 starts, replacing Daniel Ricciardo both times, funnily enough. Now he gets the opportunity at Big Red Bull. But of course, there's no Adrian Newey. There's no Jonathan Wheatley. There's a lot.
No Rob Marshall.
No Rob Marshall. Will Courtenay's probably going to be frozen out this year because he's their head of race strategy. He's going to McLaren next year to be their new sporting director. Big high up role at McLaren, a promotion essentially at McLaren for him. So he's likely going to be on gardening leave at some point in this season and year.
Also, last year with Honda until Ford steps in.
Which is really light Ford involvement and some stickers on a in-house Red Bull engine.
Yeah.
The question
don't tell certain people at Ford that they said that, by the way, but like, we know that Max Verstappen is good. We know he's like probably odds-on favorite to win the title again until proven otherwise.
Red Bull are very interesting, aren't they? Because they unloaded their car for preseason. We went, why are they reusing last year's car? And then the second day hit, and it looked like they were still using last year's car. Because you have to look very, very closely to see the differences between last year's very fast, but very tricky and very difficult to set up RB20, and this year's actually very heavily revised under the skin RB21. All the changes are underneath and inside the side pods. And it's weird. On the surface, they actually really did not look very good in preseason. They didn't get a lot of running. They did a lot of back-to-back running between different parts. And yet, if you ask Max Verstappen, he's like, car feels pretty good.
That's always been the thing, because it feels like the derogatory take is like Red Bull is always built around Max Verstappen. They would run one car if they wanted to. They prioritize his comfort over the other driver in the team, whether that's Gasly, Albon, Perez, Lawson, you name it. Why should we think it's any different this time in 2025?
Well, because halfway through last year, Max was singing a very, very different tune about the car.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, the overall impression I got out of Red Bull in Bahrain was that they still don't quite know for themselves just how fast they are. Like it was they almost came out of the gates in Bahrain too confident because their first day went really well, and they thought, all the balances are sorted, it's all sorted out. And then apparently Jos Verstappen was telling the media behind the scenes that by day 2 and 3, it's like, hang on a minute, it's not quite looking so good here. Pierre Wache, end of day 3, told the mainstream press he was happy enough and that, they have taken a step in the right direction, but they've taken some of the potential out of this car to hopefully raise its floor. Not literally, but you know what I mean. So...
And that makes a little bit of sense because last year, even down the stretch, when they could get the car in the window, it was still the fastest thing out there. The problem was finding the damn window. Because, races like Qatar, Max went bar for bar with Lando until his penalty and really couldn't get away from one another. And in Brazil, we know what Max did in Brazil last year. We know what happens when Max is a serious bitch rather than a silly bitch out on track.
Yes.
but they are in a really weird spot because I would bet on Max for the driver's title until further notice.
Yeah. Until proven otherwise, I'd likely go with him. And if it was like, if I'm thinking all with my head at the top of my shoulders, I'm thinking, right, Verstappen's the guy until he's beat.
But I just don't know where Red Bull sit in this very close grouping at the front. And
yeah.
I also get the impression with them as well, and this was talked a little bit about by Pierre as well as Max and Helmut Marko, not that you should ever listen to Helmut Marko, that it's less that they think they have a fundamental problem, more they haven't found the sweet spot yet, and that's a much better place to be than having a fundamental problem. We'll see.
Dre, Liam Lawson obviously replacing Sergio Perez after some very rough seasons on the way out. I get the sense that Liam Lawson is being grossly underrated as this season starts. I feel because throughout his history, Racing Bull's relief appearances aside, whenever he's gotten an opportunity to race something new, he's succeeded almost right away. I'm not expecting him to go out and win the Australian Grand Prix first time of asking. Red Bull just wants him to store steady points. I think whether that's resentment because the ride didn't go to somebody else that they wanted or what, but I think Lawson is being disrespected. Now, Dre, you need to tell me if that's cap or not.
I don't think it's cap. I think there's a level of validity to that. I mean, it's the story of Liam Lawson's career. He's become one of the most adaptable young drivers in motorsport. He's taken like a duck to water in everything he'd driven, from single-seaters over to DTM and Super Formula, the best Super Formula rookie season in recent memory. Like, everything about Lawson suggests that he is a highly adaptable, very skilled driver who has taken advantage of every opportunity that's been presented to him.
Yeah.
This is the biggest one yet. The problem is that this is also by far and away the most difficult. This is playing Smash Brothers, and you've turned the difficulty dial all the way up to 9.
Oh, God.
Yeah, like the ghost is really big in the background this time. Basically, you don't want to be another notch on Red Bull's bedpost. They want to be...
Albon, Gasly.
Max Verstappen is the Grim Reaper with the blood trail out of every door, and he's about to open another one. And the thing is, Liam was solid enough last year, but he couldn't... He was being pretty consistently outdone by Yuki Tsunoda, who apparently is not worth the promotion either.
Yeah.
So you are now up against like the modern teammate killer of our time.
This feels like a punt. You throw him in at the deep end like McLaren did with Oscar Piastri and Lando Norris in years past, and you think because it's all he's ever really known as a driver, it might work out for him because it worked out for those dudes and it's worked out for Lawson in the way his career's played out. I think there's a level of validity to what RJ is saying. I think there is a chance this works out. 200 points and you're happy with Liam Lawson over the course of the year, especially if Red Bull don't have the number one car out of the box, right?
I mean, look, last year, if Perez just scored steady points, they still probably grab the Constructors.
200 points and Red Bull win the Constructors comfortably.
Exactly.
200 points works out at less than a top 5 finish every round, roughly.
Yeah, and that should be possible unless he is the traditional gap off of Max, and all 4 of these teams are blanketed by 2 to 3 tenths.
Yeah,
could be the case, but we just don't know.
I think 200's a reasonable number. Of course, that's a sliding scale depending on where Red Bull sit in the power rankings.
Okay, what percentage of Verstappen's points should he be getting if it's not like an even 200?
I'd say... I'm going to go by the Kevin Turner, my boss at Autosport argument here. If he's at over 60%, that's golden. quite frankly. 60% would be great. Anything over 50, that's more than an adequate number 2 in most championship teams.
Yeah.
If it's especially first time of asking.
Yeah. If it's below 40%, then I'm concerned. But anywhere in that 40 to 60 range, and I think that's fine.
Don't be getting lapped by Max.
No.
Basically, that right there. Because when Gasly was there, he wasn't even clearing that bar by the end of his tenure. The other element with Red Bull, this is their last year with the known entity in the back of their car powering them down the straights. Reliability, little shaky last year at times. Honda needs to button that up for this year.
Yeah.
The horsepower, that's still really good. But they can't lose an engine out of the pool very early on and subject Max to a grid penalty, not when I think it's quite clear there is going to be a dogfight pretty much from day one.
That dogfight is going to include Scuderia Ferrari, which now has Sir Lewis Hamilton, the 7-time champion of the world. You know, people will say that he is actually an 8-time world champion. Again, I'm just going off the notes here, but he's at Ferrari now. That's real. He's also got Charles Leclerc as his teammate. And we will talk about this with our guests later on, but like, just to kind of tee it up a little bit, like, this is Lewis Hamilton's age 40 season. This is his 19th year in the league. He went 2 years without a win and then got 2 last year. What is he going to be? What is he going to be?
Is it fair to say at this point, I don't know?
You know what? That's entirely fair.
Because
Hamilton has earned a lot of benefit of the doubt.
Because that's the thing. Bear me for 2 minutes on this, Cam. Forgive me.
No, go for it.
There is... I call it the Hamilton sliding scale here, and I'm using myself as a visual aid on Riverside as I record this. Because there's 2 different thoughts that I'm battling with here. On the optimistic side of me goes, ... but he's Lewis Hamilton. And last year, the upside of Hamilton was as good as we've ever seen him. There was many a drive, like at Abu Dhabi at the end of the year, the British Grand Prix at Silverstone, at the Belgian Grand Prix at Spa, where Hamilton was as good as he's ever been, drove incredibly well, and you go, that's Lewis Hamilton. That's the Sir Lewis we know and love.
Yeah.
The other side of the coin says you were fundamentally beaten by George Russell last year. And I'd argue the most convincing beating you've taken in your entire 18-year career to this point. Arguably worse than 2011 when Jensen got you because he couldn't get over the Nicole Scherzinger breakup. Right? Now, 2011 was a messy bitch of a year for Lewis. Right? And you got the benefit of the doubt for that one, too.
It's what LEG says.
Right. You know, is it because I is black, etc. Now, 2024 was rough for Lewis. But I was pretty bold in my season review at the end of the last year saying that, yeah, Russell fundamentally beat him. And even the Hamilton fans who follow me were like, can't argue with you, Dre. Because for every great round that Lewis had last year, there was an equally dumb one in there where he just generally looked like he was off the boil. Kota was bad. Qatar was bad. Miami, completely pointless drive-through penalty that he took for not pressing the right button on his steering wheel. Just silly shit. Stuff you don't expect from a 39-year-old, arguably greatest F1 driver of all time.
This thing, we see it with so many athletes in other sports where sometimes the brilliance is there, but it's overridden by a lot of moments where you just think, wow, this guy doesn't have it.
Has he mentally checked out? And at that point, that side of the argument, you could make a feasible claim that he had mentally checked out. And at what point was I thinking, when is it okay to say that? When is it okay to say, hey, there might be something here in the Hamilton's no longer motivated by Mercedes, especially given he likely would have been frozen out of discussions because at the point he decides to leave, he's now a rival. You can't be telling them shit.
A direct rival as well with Ferrari right there with them.
So I sit here as someone who has nothing but respect for Lewis, a man who hangs on my bedroom wall I don't know what he is entering 2025. And that is fascinating in good and equal measure, because I need to point out, and a lot of people are still so cynical about this. Charles Leclerc is one of the best racing drivers on the planet right here, right now, and I will be damned if anyone says otherwise.
Oh, absolutely, man.
He's second in my colleagues' top 50 for racing drivers last year, and I couldn't argue with it. Unless it was Alex Poulin, in which case, fair enough. But even Poulin had a bit of a down year by his standards.
Oh, he only won the championship convincingly rather than dominatingly.
Yes, exactly.
Look, you can only argue. Like, Charles Leclerc is
incredible,
every bit as great as his fans say. One of the most electric drivers on planet Earth over a single lap. Arguably, Lewis's biggest problem over the last 4 years has been qualifying. The one spot where Bottas and Rosberg could get one over on him was on Saturday in time trials. Well, in terms of qualifying, Charles Leclerc is a teammate killer. He is unfucking believable over a single lap. At Monaco, I wouldn't have anyone else in that car. And this is Ferrari. We don't know what Ferrari are, because Ferrari are Ferrari and Ferrari don't know what they are.
Yeah, like, I'm so glad you are giving me, like, as an early Charles Leclerc investor, I'm just like, thank you for this. Because people have gotten very comfortable for a long time saying he was just another bottle merchant like the last guy he replaced and the guy before that.
Because that's the problem.
It's the team?
That's the problem. Leclerc had... I think the problem with Leclerc is that he had so many, like, and I don't say so many, he had one or two high-profile errors a year, and people jumped on that as to why he's not a great driver, while conveniently ignoring the rest of the season where he's kicking people's asses in.
Well, I think the big one that sticks in the minds is 2022, because the one time we saw him in a true title fight, well, Red Bull and Max tore him and Ferrari to pieces. And a lot more of that was on Ferrari than it was on Charles. But there was enough in it where Charles threw away a result here.
Well, I'm sorry, Paul Ricard.
Paul Ricard, I would say Imola as well. Imola, where you first get the sign of, oh, Red Bull's got something here. Not that we knew what was to come at the time.
No.
But the one instance that we have seen Charles Leclerc in a title fight, well, Hulk, Loki, Puny God, etc.
Like to think it's different now.
You'd like to think it's different now. This is a very different Ferrari, and a very different Ferrari to last year. I mean, probably the most clean sheet car of the grid, top to bottom.
It looks like
front end.
Pull rod front end, yeah. Was about to make the
front end. Hideous HP logo on the engine cover.
Hideous shade of red.
It's giving F93A, and that is never ever a good thing.
As long as it goes fast.
Well, that's the thing about preseason. There were times where the Ferrari looked like greased lightning out on track, especially in Leclerc's hands, and times where it just looked unwieldy, more in Lewis's hands, especially in the second half of stints. I would expect that to get better with Lewis, but I am a little bit concerned in the first, maybe third of the season, because this is Leclerc's team, this is Leclerc's car. He's had direct input with it all the way through last year. And Charles Leclerc, like, with all due respect to George Russell, who is a phenomenal racing driver, he ain't Charles Leclerc.
How long is the lease for Fred Vasseur?
It feels like less of a mafia execution discussion.
Yeah,
scenes with Ferrari versus Sergio Marchionne's coup of everyone breathing in that team multiple times while he was alive.
Can I just say, in general, Fred Vasseur has been a wonderful breath of fresh air to Ferrari.
Yeah,
I like ridiculously it. So. He's
liked this dude for a while.
He's the first F1 team principal with Ferrari that we haven't been able to meme out the door on a weekly basis.
He is a genuinely light-hearted, funny, likable man who cares about his drivers. He cares about his staff. I've heard glowing stories about how he treats people in the back at Ferrari, that he's approachable, he's dependable, and the air of intimidation around Maranello isn't there with Fred in charge. And that is half the battle, quite frankly.
It cannot be if they want to win a world championship, because the amount of stories that has come out about the Senna era, the nature of that team behind the scenes, that you wonder how they can thank their technical staff for producing a pair of really great cars and Sebastian Vettel for being able to wheel them. Yeah. Because you hear about how the team was run and you wonder how they ever even got as far as they did against the juggernaut that was late 2010s Mercedes. But ultimately, Ferrari is here for one thing and one thing only.
To win.
Well, so are the Dallas Cowboys, but much like the Dallas Cowboys, they haven't been doing that for a while.
We're now at year 17 since Ferrari last won a major title.
That's not good enough.
It's the longest active streak of the big hitters in Formula One.
Was that as long as the gap between constructors' titles from Ferrari until 99?
What was it, 82?
Was it 82 they won the constructors? And I think more recently, 08 they won the constructors.
Yeah.
Was it 82 or 83?
It's one of those years, and they didn't win again until 99. It's been too long for Ferrari. We know what the objective is. I'm wondering, how combustible does this get during the middle of the season? Because and I know, neither one of these dudes want to be
83
the wingman.
And you ain't paying Lewis Hamilton $50 million a year, including tax write-offs towards his charity, and all the clout that having Sir Lewis Hamilton in your team.
Putting an F40 out there on a rainy day.
Yeah, pull out an F40 in front of Enzo's house, have the 7 open doors.
In front of Enzo's house.
Right. You don't pull that shit out for Lewis Hamilton to finish third in this championship this year. No one's here for Lewis as a bronze medalist.
My deep concern, if I were to tie this back to Lewis, my deep concern with Lewis is the qualifying.
Yeah.
Because on race day, he can still do it. He's still, like we saw that in Abu Dhabi, he was electric in that race. If this top 3 to 4 teams are as close as we think they're going to be, if he has anything like the gaps that he was having to Russell last year, he's going to give himself a lot of work to do and a lot of competition to get around, including Max Verstappen, where you don't pass him unless you crash through him if you want him to pass, if you want to pass him. And Charles Leclerc is 1B best driver over a single lap in the sport right now.
Yeah, that's what I fear will happen. I think Leclerc is going to be the spearheader of that team, and I think a lot of people are not going to be mentally prepared for that. Let's see how it goes.
And that brings us to McLaren, last year's World Constructors Championship champions, in defiance of maybe themselves.
Despite their best efforts.
Lando Norris was second in the championship last year. Oscar Piastri was fourth. That was their first F1 championship of any kind in 26 years. Lando won races.
Points in 2007.
No, they didn't. It says here they got 0.
Funny how that. Oh, you peel it back and it's scarlet underneath there instead of Dayglow red.
Look, Lando Norris a race winner. Oscar Piastri also a race winner. There were no huge changes to the team. It seemed like they were very good in testing. What should we expect to be different here, other than the expectations?
Well, as said, journo consensus, clear best car coming out of Bahrain's test. Somewhere between 2 and maybe 5 temps, depending on who you ask, is what I've been told. Certain teams think McLaren's got half a second on the field. I don't think it's that, but the long runs in Bahrain looked very promising for McLaren.
That's good.
My intrigue is going to be, how do they respond to the flexi-win ban? Because they were the biggest benefactors of that last year. They're
the furthest down that road.
Yeah. So what's going to happen when Spain hits? That's going to be the question. And the difference is, though, for the first time in 3 years, McLaren looks like they're going to start the year with a very good package, as opposed to waiting for the first update to hit a third of the way into the year. If McLaren can hit the ground running, we saw it with Red Bull. Red Bull was able to hold on to the constructors' lead because of their great start, pretty much all the way through the first 2/3 of the season, despite the fact Sergio Perez dropped off a cliff after the first third of the year. If McLaren can hit the ground running, they've got a very good chance of winning both titles this year. Because I don't have any questions about the driver quality. Lando Norris was a bit flaky at times last year. I don't think he's making the same mistakes he's doing in like the second time round being a major contender. I think Norris is a elite driver. I think a lot of people were very quick to rag on his mistakes last year without ignoring the fact that this was a huge leap forward for Lando last year.
This is the first year where he was expected to win races.
And he did. Like, I don't know what people were expecting. Like, don't get me wrong. McLaren had the best car for 2/3 of the year, but a lot of McLaren's issues stemmed from their management and strategy department, not Lando directly. In my opinion, anyway. So for me, the only drama, in my opinion, is from a place that not a lot of people are talking about. What if Oscar Piastri is really good this year?
That's the thing, like, he's been really good the last couple of years he's been in the sport.
He was flashy, but not consistent.
The ceiling is one of the highest. The ceiling is maybe higher than Lando's. The floor is quite a bit lower and shows up far too often. Now, for the stage of the career that he's at, that's fine. I mean, he's still He's going to year 3.
Yeah, this is his 3rd year in the sport.
Right.
And he's got a win on the board and probably could have taken 1 or 2 more last year if things fell the right way. Could say that a lot about McLaren last year, where McLaren almost didn't seem to believe how good their car was and was either too aggressive and it blew up in their face or too conservative and had wins snuck out from underneath them. I'm really curious to see how they respond to that this year. I am concerned about the flexi wing band because that is their cheat code. And no, I'm not saying that and that they're cheating. That's their ace in the hole. To get the car to work at low speed, but to keep the balance at high speed. The thing that really crippled Red Bull last year. They could get the car to work at one speed, but not the other because they never really went down that road.
Yeah.
If Red Bull, have gone flexi front wing, but not to the same degree as the others, can roll that back for Spain, they're arguably in the pound seat in that regard. As is Ferrari, who again only really went all in on flexi wings really around Coda last year. McLaren's car, most conceptually, is built on that foundation. And again, I think it's really silly that the FIA are taking that away mid-season rather than addressing it from last season when we knew what was going on.
Well, for sports full of mid-season technical directives and changes that impact title races, both short-term and long-term. Can I make a prediction right here? Oscar Piastri is going to be the first Australian in a long time to win his home race, and unlike Daniel Ricciardo in 2014 when he got on the podium, he's going to keep it. I think that's going to happen.
It will now be much funnier if he does win that race and he is disqualified for a technical infringement, and we can send all of our complaints to @RJ O'Connell on Blue Sky.
Sure.
Thank you for that.
There's a good 40% chance Oscar does exactly that, and people are going to start talking.
Yeah, because Webber and Ricciardo were good on their day, but they never won their home race for a variety of reasons. And I think Oscar's a step better than both.
He's got to get the tire wear under control. That I think is the biggest thing. Is his limiting factor is his tire wear, more because Lando is so good at it now.
Yeah.
If he can get that and he can use that speed, oh, mama.
It's two alpha dogs. They will not want to play number two to each other forever.
Hey, look, if they're 5/10 ahead of the field, then they're not going to have to worry about taking points off of one another. I don't think they're that far ahead, though.
Me neither. And, well, we saw what Oscar Piastri did at Monza. He's got no problem sending one on his teammate if he feels like he's got a shot at a win.
We love that killer instinct.
Yeah, everybody loves that killer instinct. Like, look, I get why people love Oscar. I totally do. Like, he's an incredibly likable, very dry humor, classic Australian meathead. And I like him for that. And he's a damn talented driver. You could see, you know what it is? He's Dragon Ball when Gohan briefly goes Super Saiyan 2 in the hyperbolic time chamber. You could see what the vision is here.
Yep.
Like, if he puts it all together, this is a terrifying prospect. Like, this dude is fast as hell. If he can find it.
Lando Norris was that prospect a little bit, not too long ago before Oscar came on the scene.
Yeah.
And he's a more finished product.
This team this team cannot be naive this year.
No.
Don't take it seriously.
They have zero excuses if they come out of the gate swinging. Which last year they had an excuse. Red Bull started exactly where they left off 2019, hotter than fish grease. If they don't bring home both titles, this will be an abject failure on all parties involved.
A great feeling on that one. Now, Dre, if I had a nickel for every time I brought on an accomplished media member from a different sport onto Motorsport 101 to talk F1 at the start of a season, would I have anywhere close to enough money to pay off any potential swearing fines?
No. You'd be about $39,998 short.
Should we do it anyway?
Yes, I think we should.
Because coming up after this, Motorsport 101 welcomes modern internet sports renaissance man Spencer Hall to the podcast. And it's up right after this.
Welcome to a special interview here on the Motorsport 101 podcast. I can't quite believe I'm saying this. It's Ryan Nanny when he was on here all over again. Just being shocked and surprised by some of the guests that RJ O'Connell is able to pull on this damn Pokemon podcast as we do. But you've probably recognized this man on ESPN's Countdown to F1, the DNF podcast, the Channel 6 newsletter, the Shutdown Fullcast, all Mongolian tourism, the right time of Bomani Jones. This sounds like the Tiger Woods runoff when he's going through all the accomplishments and then Phil Mickelson goes, all right. Spencer Hall. Hello, Spencer. Welcome to the show. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. I really identify with Phil way more than Tiger for a lot of reasons. mostly lining up on 18 with the tournament in the bag and then going driver and listening to everyone go, no!
Is that before or after somebody's put something on it? Knowing Phil, allegedly.
Knowing Phil, definitely after.
just make it absolutely sure on that one. So I mean, you got to start off first and foremost, because I credit RJ for a lot of these questions because he had to scramble to put this together as well at the last minute. So I love him for that. I'm going to kiss him after this is over. Most people will probably know you mostly from college football and your coverage of that. I mean, I love that Bomani Jones is just the best college football rider in America, which
very kind of him.
It is extremely kind of him, but also probably accurate. But how does one of the most forward-thinking college football writers in the sport end up getting into Formula One, and not just that, but then being a part of ESPN's original programming for the sport? Because that's quite the leap, I think it's fair to say.
It is. I think an important part of being around for ESPN's first two seasons came about via knowing something about Formula One. That was a very big element, I think. I think they went around the room. Yeah, and they said, who do we have? And I was on that list of people who knew something about F1. So I managed to get in on the first two seasons of their coverage, which was fantastic. But how I got into F1, I do predate. Not as a fanatico, but I do predate Drive to Survive. Although Drive to Survive obviously like rekindled F1 interest in me and a lot of other people on a scale that really didn't even compare to what was happening before. I came along on F1 sort of like through the Killer Years, which was this documentary that the BBC did about the most dangerous period in F1 history, like from say 54 to I'd say 84, right? Like around there, like the early prehistory. And it's horrifying and it's really dangerous and kind of appalling at times. And I was hooked. I was like, oh, it's great. It's phenomenal. This sport. Yeah, like that's probably doesn't say very much good about me as a person, but that was one of the things that really hooked me on it. And but even before that, though, like occasionally you'd see F1 on TV, and you know, I grew up watching the occasional Senna race, and all I knew is that Senna looked like he raced with God. It turns out that was very much the case. Yeah. So you know, you pick up little bits. I think there's a lot of us, especially my age, who came about with F1 as you knew a driver. You know, you knew a Hunt, you knew a Mansell, right? You knew a Senna, you knew a Prost. You know, and even that I didn't like Alan Prost because he had bad hair. Thought his hair looked stupid. That was it.
That's pretty low on the list of reasons why I've heard Alan Prost has been shit on. So I must say
this is a very innocent reason to dislike Alan Prost, and a very genuine one, right?
There's been more cynical ones in my time as an F1 journalist, believe me. So did you have a guy growing up when you got into F1? I was a Schumacher guy. I'm probably a little bit longer than you, Spence. I grew up a Michael Schumacher guy. I think Cam did as well. To a degree. Like who was
Schumacher? I grew up a Schumacher hater.
I grew up respecting the hell out of Schumacher, but mainly as a Kimi Räikkönen fan.
That's fair.
Yeah, if you were Finnish, I was a big fan of you. Like I'm typically like, for some reason, I'm not a big nationalist when it comes to picking my drivers. But if you're Finnish, you automatically have an edge with me. That's like a modifier. It's like a +5. Yeah, because you're probably weird and you're probably pretty funny. You're gonna do at least one funny thing. My favorite driver was Senna. You know, like Senna was romance. And that's like the kind of, you know, fandom you can only have when you're a kid, you know, when you're younger. You don't necessarily look at the particulars. You don't dig into the, you know, filthy details of the person's personal life. You just go, oh, that guy, he's cool. So yeah, that was my guy.
Completely valid reasons. I mean, I was the exact same way with Schumacher, the Scarlet Red Ferrari. The mythos of the Ferrari was what alerted me. I mean, my dad was a huge Michael guy, a huge Ferrari car nut as well, so I completely can relate to that feeling. Now, I know you've known RJ for a little while because you've bumped into each other at the paddock. Tell us a little bit about that experience, and then I'm going to throw to you on the next question on this one a little bit.
It's very weird because, like, I've listened to, like, a lot of Spencer. I was probably the one that, like, injected a little bit of the influence into this show. I am so sorry. But then one day I'm just, like, I'm working at racefans.net. I get a credential to the Miami Grand Prix in 2022. And then all of a sudden I'm walking around between where the paddocks are and the entrance to Hard Rock Stadium. And there's Spencer. We bump into each other, and it's just like, "Hey, fancy seeing you here."
Yeah, there's a bizarre collection of people because at one point it's me, RJ, Jackie Stewart, Paulo Banchero. Paulo Banchero's there, and
sure it wasn't Pat Mahomes. According to Martin Brundle.
I mean, you know, Brundle's seen more than me. So like when he says it's Patrick Mahomes, I'm inclined to believe him, even if I know he's wrong, because I'm like, I don't know. He knows more about this stuff than I do. But yeah, we're all in the paddock at the same time, along with like Jimmy Butler. It's a very, very strange selection of people who managed to wind their way into the F1 paddock.
Did you ever bump into Wemby at the 23 USGP in Austin?
I saw him. He's hard to miss.
No kidding.
You know, I've bumped into three people who I knew who they were instantly the minute I saw them at an F1 race. One was Wemby. The other was Shaq, because he's the only Shaq-sized shaped thing in the world.
Yes.
There's only one thing that's Shaq shaped.
He is his own unit of measurement.
Yeah, like, they have the border fence between the sort of muster area of TV and like mechanical stuff and all the logistics stuff, and then there's this road, and then there's the paddock in Austin. And I remember you can't see over the fence unless it's Shaq, and I just saw this head floating above the fence, and I thought, oh, that has to be Shaq with a biblical certainty. It's like there's no other person. And the other person was Patrick Dempsey. AKA Dr. McDreamy. Because, he came in and he smells fantastic. You're like, this is what a famous person should smell like, is Patrick Dempsey.
Porsche racing legend as well. And of course, we bumped into each other at Le Mans last year. And you're not just an F1 guy. You watch a lot of motorsport, as I understand.
If it goes fast, If it goes fast, I'll watch it. Like that's really kind of the deal. And I feel like that's a Dale Earnhardt influence from a very young age. Is Earnhardt was super big. Like he was a Catholic race fan. By that I mean just universal. Like he would whatever was in the church he'd pray to, and that went F1, IMSA, truck racing, go-karts, what have you. Like I feel like he put a real high value on that. And when I was young, I read about Dale really loving F1, and that means that as a kid you go, well, Dale Earnhardt likes it. It has to be good. So, you pay attention, and that's how you learn.
Now, for me, being in the paddock, working an F1 event was just eye-opening. I've come to know that as I've gone into my job, more focused on sports car racing. But Spencer, what was the biggest change you felt since you started covering the sport more in depth, passing that barrier from being a fan to being an occasional writer to being in that environment with the people that make this work, whether that's competitors, other media, etc.?
The biggest change, I think, you go from being sort of wowed and completely awed by everything to really sort of trying to pick up the political wins. Like that's you sort of wander through and go, they don't look like they have as much money this year. Right. You start to notice the particulars, you go, ooh, that race team isn't calling me back, or that race team is definitely calling me more. So they probably there's either some bad stuff happening or they need help, right, in the press. So you start to notice those kind of like journalistic-y type things, right? Vibe checks, where you go through the paddock and you see a driver and you go, ooh, you do some like kind of bullshitty journalism thing where you go, it looks like they feel good today, which isn't right, but you're going to try to do it anyway. Usually, sometimes I've been like, oh man, that guy looks like terrible. It looks like he's not going to win this race at all. And then, it's Charles Leclerc absolutely smoking a lap. And you go, oh, okay, cool. I guess I was totally wrong. So there's that. I think you kind of come full circle and you go, I don't know anything. Then you think you know a little something. And then in the end, you don't know anything. Like, absolutely nothing.
Yeah, spot on. Now, last month, ESPN said it won't renew its US TV deal after it runs out in 2025. So if this is it for you on Countdown F1, what's been some of your favorite memories of this chapter of your career? Because it's a pretty significant one.
I think last year's Austin race was the coolest. In terms of, we had a good spot, like we're right up by Big Red, right up on the hill. That was delightful. I think the coolest race memory is, for an individual race, was Lando winning at Miami, because that was very pure. That was genuine excitement on everyone's part, not just because it was Lando, like that obviously is big, but because it was McLaren, and it was McLaren winning big, and maybe a sign that we weren't in for the kind of Red Bull sweep that we thought we might be in for.
Absolutely. I mean, certain guests of that race aside, that was a pretty awesome moment at Miami, I gotta say.
Same weekend that Adrian Newey was announced he was going to be walking away from Red Bull as well. So if you want a sliding doors moment for how 2024 played out, even if it's a bit coincidental, that's probably the one right there, which is kind of wild to even think about looking back on it now.
Yeah. And it's also, it's Miami. It's relatively early in the season. Everyone's still covering it as in fine fettle. By the time you get to Vegas, everybody is kind of a mess. Yeah. I mean, endearing. That's a very endearing term in my world. But yeah, everyone was kind of a hot mess by the time Vegas rolls around both years in a row. That's not to say Vegas isn't a great race or it isn't fun, but bedraggled. I think everyone who's involved is just a little worn at that point.
Wait. That last year's was round 22 in a 24 race canon. That was the first 24 race season in F1. Not the first scheduled one, but because of cancellations in Imola and the flooding, last year's was the first proper 24 race season.
Yeah.
And as a member of the press, I'm calling this off the cuff, like, how exhausting was that at the end? Because it's tiring for me, and I'm working from home and occasionally going to an office in central London. Some of you guys are flying thousands of miles around the world. Just what is that like? Like, by the time you'll get into December, and we're talking about watching F1 races, which is just crazy. Because when I was growing up, seasons were done in October, and you got the whole autumn and then winter as an off season. It was crazy.
Yeah. I think for me, it's fine because ESPN, we're only doing 3 races. So you're only doing 3 races and you're watching the others. That's fine. If it's in the middle of college football season, so I was doing double duty, that's a little hectic. But at the same time, I think the ones that really Vegas, there's an element of adrenaline just because of where it is, who's involved, the setting. You take everybody who's got, basically like perma jet lag, and then you throw them in a place where there are no clocks. So they're spent, but they're also kind of running on adrenaline at that point. So, and that goes for the media. I cannot imagine what race teams go through in terms of everything. A universal thing in motorsport. Like, this was fun having grown up going to some NASCAR events and reading about NASCAR and being more familiar. Going to an F1 event, it was very comforting to see that the thing that is a universal across all races and all motorsports is that when the race ends, everybody gets the hell out. That's it. Everybody instantly throws everything.
We're going home.
Shipping container or the next, right? Like, okay, we have to be in Dubai in 2 weeks. Let's go, right?
So someone who has to edit other people's audio and video who work for us at the meetings, you will never know how quick the other journos are like, this is the last thing on the list. We're getting the fuck back to the hotel now. Mm-hmm. We are not shooting this again. You take this video or we leave it. I could completely vouch for that. Now, I saw you on Blue Sky a minute ago as well, Spence. And
oh boy, what did I say?
Yeah, gassing up MotoGP. And did you watch the season opener? And like, what have you made of MotoGP in recent years in general? Because I'm a huge bike guy. Cam is a huge bike guy as well. RJ kind of grew into it a little bit later on, but I mean, your general thoughts on MotoGP, I thought, were fascinating in the best way.
So this is RJ mentioned Le Mans, and Le Mans was a really eye-opening just in general in terms of institutional knowledge, because everyone at Le Mans also has their hands in something else. And that goes for the tire companies, right? Like Osthere's Michelin. You can just, if you want to know who has their hands in multiple buckets, go to Le Mans and you can go, oh my God, these guys are doing everything. You go to Ferrari and you go, there's an entire endurance team and it has nothing to do with the Formula One team. Like, and it's even run kind of differently. It's wild.
Yeah, it's run good.
It's beautiful. Oh, dude, they're awesome. The whole
function.
They not only do they function, man. Do you know what it's like to be in a journo gig, any kind of media gig, where somebody comes to you and goes, "Would you like to talk to all 3 drivers right now?"
Very much so. Yes.
Yeah, they're the best, and they're like, "Would you like a coffee?" And you're like, "I'm going to kiss you." Yeah, like that's
the level of media accessibility is 150,000 times bigger than what Formula One gives you. It's ridiculous. Even I'm relatively inexperienced at that very high level of reporting, but F1, you've got to beg, borrow, or steal to get anything from a driver or anyone higher up in a team, unless you've been in the sport 30 years and you've got an address book that's 4,000 pages big. Like in sports car racing, they want to give you your drivers. They want to give you everything. I remember rolling up last year out of nowhere, and Toyota says, "Hey, we've got Kenny Rovanpera available. Do you want to interview him?" Would I? Yeah.
That's crazy. That's all I want to do, man. Thanks. Yeah, like it's so. I mentioned that because if you talked to the engineers there, and if you talked to any of the people running the teams or any of the people who are in charge of product, right? Particularly like tire people, you would, ask them and they got really excited. Their eyes got like dinner plates when you talked about 2 things. One was rally car, because everyone I think secretly loves rally car or doesn't secretly or openly loves rally car. And it would be all they would do if there were any way to really make a viable mega sport out of it. I think that's all anyone would really do. But the other thing that they would do is this. If you mentioned MotoGP, everyone kind of got that, like, their eyes blacked over and you heard like, whoa, like they love MotoGP. And MotoGP itself, I didn't watch the opener yet because I have a backlog of sporting events that's like 9 hours deep. But MotoGP, I think, has so much room to grow. And I really hope the move is to like get people on board with savvy marketing and meet them where they live. Because when you watch the ends of races, like TikTok, I don't know what they're paying for on TikTok, but do you know how many MotoGP finishes I've seen? Like tightly edited MotoGP finishes.
Oh yeah.
Where, you know, you get total strangers who are in the comments and they're looking at it going, dude, what is this? How can I watch more of this? And you go, well, it's not all like that. But when it's like it, it's really good. So I don't know if that's part of the upcoming marketing push for MotoGP, but my feeling is that that's coming. And it's great because it's short, it's shorter, it's easier to digest, and it is viscerally just stunning. Like, it's just beautiful when you watch it.
I've said to many people, there is no motorsport on earth like MotoGP at the very, very peak of its existence. I mean, anyone's ever watched Rossi versus Lorenzo in Catalunya or Stoner versus Rossi in Laguna Seca, people know exactly what I'm talking about. They're going to be watching or listening to this, and they've seen it and they just wet themselves at how great it is. There is no motorsport series like it at its very best. It's absolutely ridiculous.
I mean, you can sell that Vroom. You know, like I can
absolutely.
I can sell you on Isle of Man. Now, Isle of Man's not MotoGP. Isle of Man is just its own insane world. But I can sell you on it. Now, do you want to watch the whole thing or consider the actual consequences of the Isle of Man race? No one wants to. But I can sell you on a TikTok of it. Now, if I could sell you on a TikTok of it, I could probably get you to another motorsport on two wheels. That's yeah.
If Isle of Man is the entry level motorsport entree, I do not want to know what the main course may involve.
I'm gonna start you on heroin and we're gonna get you down to weed. That's really what we're gonna do.
Well, welcome to Max Mosley's negotiation tactics 101 here, folks.
They work.
The iron fist wrapped in a velvet glove, but very much so. I mean, we've got to talk a little bit about this season coming up, Spencer, and I mean, should we expect another season in 2025 where we get 7 different winners from 4 different teams? Because last year it was kind of a little bit of lightning in a bottle with the way the sport converted, or converged, I should say, really.
It feels... Does this season feel more wide open in terms of... How's this? I feel like the season is more wide open in terms of potential pratfalls and disappointments than potential successes. And that may be just me as a natural pessimist looking at things and going,
sure,
this team doesn't have this figured out, or this team doesn't have this figured out. But really, Mercedes could be crushing in terms of disappointment, in terms of their actual performance. Look at them and go, do you really see any reason for them to really have complete 100% solid reasons for optimism? There's some there. There's a lot. But I think there are more challenges than there are guarantees. That is the same, by the way, on the bright side for Red Bull, because what is to be made of the continued rapid active disassembly of the Red Bull space station? Like, they are falling from orbit very slowly in terms of dominance. That's what it is. Are they still up there? Yeah. Do they still have the best driver in the world? Absolutely.
Yeah.
Do they have more questions than they have answers, especially looking forward? Absolutely.
I'd say so.
Yeah, you know, they've had a lot of turnover behind the scenes. They've had obvious public turmoil. Can't really wait to see how Drive to Survive addresses certain elements of the 2024 storyline. You know what I mean? I saw Christian Horner and I was like, I see we had some input over the edit. Because
just a smidge.
Just at the very least a smidge. Yeah, like that's all very interesting to me, and I'm being kind when I say interesting. But that to me, like, when you go through and then you go to McLaren, and McLaren, you go, I can always, what's your disaster scenario? And you go, you have 2 young drivers and you have high expectations. I don't need more than that to set you up for potential failure. So just, when you look at those three teams, the only one who comes through and you go, hey, we're good, we got things settled, Ferrari. But even then, Ferrari made a high price purchase, a big splashy purchase that if it doesn't go well, I think people will be genuinely and justifiably disappointed because, what if Lewis isn't even what we expected 2025 Lewis to be? Like, what if that doesn't go as well as we want it to be? I don't think anyone's expecting him to instantly come in and be the number 2 driver in the world or the number 1 driver in the world again. But what is he going to be? That's a great question to me.
I know I'm not the only person that said this as well, because it's like, well, have we all forgotten that Lewis Hamilton got relatively beaten by George Russell last year in his age 39 season? I think a lot of, don't get me wrong, I'm sure you know, Spencer, the Hamilton fandom is a very strong, passionate fan base that are incredibly supportive of Lewis, and understandably so in many aspects. But I think a lot of people have glossed over that convenient part of 2024 where they realized George Russell was just better last year across the board. And a part of me does wonder, Charles Leclerc is no slouch. He has beaten Carlos Sainz and Sebastian Vettel in that team before, driven 2 very, very good drivers out of that team. Like, this shouldn't be a walkover for Lewis, right? Right?
It shouldn't be. And I don't think it will be. That's the thing. I think at this point, Charles Leclerc, if I had to, if we're putting money on it, Leclerc to me is the number 1 driver. If this were anyone else, if we took Lewis's name off of it, because I think justifiably the potential of Lewis on his best day, even at his age, is so tantalizing that you might go, well, we're not talking about a 1-2 set. We're talking about a 1A, 1B driver. No, he's the number 2 driver here. Like that's what I believe he is. In fact, I do not know if that is what he is being told by Roll. I do not know if that is what he thinks he is, but that's what he is. And I think over the course of the season that, should become apparent, because it's a huge season for Charles Leclerc. It's a massive season for him in terms of, validating potential, in terms of delivering on that potential. So, where does putting a potential volatile, situation with a justifiably respected and revered veteran in a legendary new outfit? We're doing a lot of really big photo ops and a lot of really good PR work. We have cool shots of Lewis in the coldest setup you've ever seen, the jacket, the fit, everything at Maranello in front of the Ferrari house. That's cool. What's this going to look like on the track in terms of dynamics?
He just cut one of the coldest CM Punk with the WWE flag off the microphone promos to Time Magazine the other week.
Yeah. And so that's all cool. We've done everything right so far. But I think we've also seen that, when Ferrari's had 2 good drivers, you can get wildly varying results.
Absolutely. Yeah. I was a feud Seb guy when I was a content creator on YouTube. I know how that story ended painfully, to say the least. And it all looks great now in the suit and the jackets and the blazers and the great artistic shots and the using the phrase "I'm built different" unironically in Time Magazine, which is wild for a 40-year-old to come out and say, it's no big thing, by the way. My man is using 25-year-old terminology as at age 40 in his, 18th year in Formula One. I'm not here to have kids. I'm not here to have girlfriends. I'm here to win. And he sounds like an anime protagonist. And people are going to love this. And I'm not sure how it's going to turn out. And that is fascinating.
He's been working out on a planet with different gravity and eating a lot of muffins like Goku.
Oh, yeah. 100 times.
He got up at the announce table and started calling everybody bald frauds.
Yeah.
Yeah. He's
put a hand on the shoulder of the F1 media at large.
Yeah. That is, it's one thing where I go, also too, you go, well, how much are you going to throw your weight around? He can throw his weight around, right? He can. That's Sir Lewis Hamilton. So what's he going to do in that respect? This is a cross sport thing. Aging veterans do not necessarily assume the same things about their age and talent that you do.
Yeah, one of the other big end stories that I think is going to get talked about a lot, Spence, is Kimi Antonelli making his Mercedes debut this year, 18 years of age. Coming in, had that free practice at Monza last year. Didn't go so well. Wrecked a car 10 minutes in. The amount of glaze from some of my peers in the industry for a guy wrecking an F1 car minutes into his debut was quite ratifying, because I think a lot of people clearly want this kid to be the next big thing. What do you think Kimi Antonelli's going to be in 2025?
Volatile. That feels like, just based on the little bit I've seen him drive, he drives like an 18-year-old with a very fast car. And that means that it's an interesting counterbalance to me in terms of George. Because George is going to, like, nobody exists in terms of an absolute value. You are in a context. And the context here is fascinating to me because of what he's going to have to be on that race team. If we're going to compete, and Mercedes is going to have to do this, they cannot win races with George alone. They're going to need teamwork, right? That's just a matter of, I think, where the car's at and their sort of engineering setup. So they're going to need good teamwork. They have an 18-year-old who's going to have to take orders and execute them accurately in terms of track position, in terms of where to be, what to do. That's fascinating. Objectively watching them, especially with somebody who we've seen him race, and he has the thing that, they talk about with football players, where they go, you can't teach a dog to bite, right? If they don't bite when they're puppies, they're not going to bite. He's clearly aggressive. He's clearly someone who will push a machine to its limits, and he is very aggressive and has the skill necessary. What I'm wondering is that temperamentally, how do you manage that in terms of a race team that doesn't have dominant machines, who they're going to have to work together?
Especially with George Russell, who's now going to be leader of that team, and is someone that, if Mercedes are good, maybe an outside shot at the championship this year.
Yeah.
I don't think they're a million miles away from that place. They did win 4 races last year. So, I mean, it could be very intriguing as to how that plays out. It wouldn't
be the first time that New Labour made a big push up the order, let's just say.
No kidding. Anything else in the midfield that you find intriguing, Spencer? Because, I mean, we got a lot of little things that add up here. You got Aston Martin and Adrian Newey over there making about £1 a minute in that team now. We've got Haas. They had the big upswing last year. Racing Bulls. I love that RJ's called it the Racing Bulls Anxiety Cup, which I think is very fair given the driver stability over there. Yeah. I mean, Williams have got Carlos Sainz. What's leaping off the page to you in the midfield, Spencer?
In the midfield, to me, the most interesting team is Aston, and they're barely midfield, right? They're like upper midfield.
Yeah. They're kind of caught in this no man's land where they're just like, you have a bunch of 12-0 teams and a bunch of garbage, and then they're just kind of stuck in perpetual 7-5 land.
Yeah, they are mid with a lot of like upward mobility, a lot of potential for upward mobility. So I'm fascinated by what they could come up with. I know everyone's looking for Adrian Newey to, instantly create the next great race car, which is fair because he's been able to do that, man. Like, I don't think that's crazy when people go, well, it's going to take a while to show up. Yeah, but I understand the excitement. Yeah. Don't expect me to be completely rational about it. You just kind of, if I know an engineer's name or I know a designer's name, then that's really good because it means they've been successful in the past, but it's also bad because I'm going to confuse it for magic. Yes. That's what I'm going to, and I think I'm not, and that's somebody I'm pretty skeptical, right? Like, I know I'm going to do that and rein in my enthusiasm. An average fan will go, oh, Adrian Newey's got this. Adrian Newey's, there's just like 1,000 fans who just are like, we got it in the bag, man. Newey's on board. And you have to explain to him, you go, these are big pieces and it takes a while to get them rolling.
Yeah. I mean, especially given, this is the last year of this regulation set. We've got a brand new set of rules coming in next year. They're going to be dividing up resources and management. There's a whole heap of that on the table. Aston's had a big restructuring at the top, new team principal. Their old one, Dan Fallows, has been stuffed into a locker somewhere at Silverstone after just going backwards the last year and a half.
A very plush closet. It
is Aston Martin.
Right. It's F1, right? When they're like, oh, he's been shunted. He's been moved aside. And you go, yeah, and they'll buy out your whole contract and you'll get the rest of the year to look for a job. And,
no, he has to go at home and not work. Or maybe he gets to design an Aston Martin.
I will pay you precisely this much to go away.
The dream, man.
Real.
Real. Who doesn't want to get paid not to go to work at the end of the day? That's just that's when you know you've made it. Like, so if there's a pro tip for those guys in life, be a little bit out of your depth designing an F1 car, and then you'll get paid not to come to work. It's the best way to go in life, clearly.
I will give you 14 million pounds to walk out of this room right now. Oh, take it. Go.
Absolutely, man.
Kimi Raikkonen in 2009. I was like, I could go to work, but these snowmobiles look awfully tempting.
Little bit
another reason why Kimi is the most relatable driver. What did you do after you crashed out of Monte Carlo? Right after Monaco, you're like, oh, I went and I got drunk on a boat. Relatable, absolutely relatable.
Like, not just a boat, his boats.
My boat with my boys, right? Like, what's the ideal setup? I've got my guys and a couple of ladies, and we're going to sit in a hot tub, and I'm going to strip off this fire suit and get hammered. Like, yeah.
I'll worry about the debrief later. For now, let's party.
Yeah, no, that's great. It's also why I feel like Yuki Tsunoda is the most Raikkonen compatible driver of our generation, and I mentioned Anxiety Cup because between him and rookie Isaac Hadjar, and you have Arvid Lindblad, 17-year-old phenom of the Red Bull Junior team, waiting in the wings for an opportunity. You're just thinking, oh boy, we're looking at either a one and done situation with Hadjar, or Yuki Tsunoda is about to get pushed out through no fault of his own.
This is leading to my dream, which is Yuki Tsunoda rally champion. Yuki Tsunoda rally champion.
Oh, the fun.
Him, it's hang on, blow for blow.
Could you just imagine the radio feed of him blasting down a back road at full speed? There'd just be one long beep.
Mohammed Ben Sulayem would not find that man fast enough for the
bankrupt Honda Motor Company.
Yeah. I mean, it's a rally budget. They've got $7. He's going to incur thousands in profanity fines.
I guess that gets us to our next question. It's just like Mohammed bin Sulayem's tenure at FIA president started like it was going to be something, and then it's turned into a whole lot of something else. I mean, how past the point of an untenable situation have we gotten in 2025?
Why find an executive who knows how to pick their battles? That's it. Find an executive who knows how to pick. An important exercise in power is knowing when not to use it. Right? It's finite, it's limited, it's gas. It will burn. Be careful what you burn it on. And it's very funny. I think I can explain his reign in F1 in fuel mileage terms. Right? He didn't manage it well. And I think he's going to run out of gas before he gets over the line because he picks stupid battles. He picks stupid battles no one cares about. And the more you do that, the more you turn fans off and the more you turn the drivers off. You know, like that's the other thing is that F1 needs these drivers to be engaged and they need them to promo the sport because in terms of a growth market, my suspicion is that the United States has plateaued somewhat and they're not seeing quite the bump that they had 2 to 3 years ago. And that's going to upset everybody because that means you're back on slow growth. And slow growth is fine for the long-term health of the sport. How many people who are receiving paychecks to do a job are concerned about the long term? The answer is 0, right? And if you're going to do that, don't become the nag who's overseeing the sport, nitpicking little things like profanity and making public missteps again and again on things that you should have buttoned down, right? Everybody should be David Stern. That's it. Like when somebody goes, man, David Stern ran the NBA like it was a mafia. I'm like, yeah, how much did you hear? How much did you hear? That thing was a machine. It ran buttoned up. Okay. Yeah. It worked. Okay. Can I tell you my favorite David Stern story? No,
go for it, please.
Okay. This is Tom Ziller's story. Okay. So Tom Ziller is a longtime NBA writer, still writes a newsletter. It's great. You should subscribe to it. And Tom Ziller got his start as an anonymous blogger. No one knew his name. Tom Ziller is in fact a pseudonym. It is not his real name. It is his pen name. And he still uses it because he's got a whole other day job and has for like 20 years.
Wow.
So Tom was at a thing. It was like an NBA, like summer league kind of thing, like pretty minor. No reason for an exec to really kind of like hardcore prep for who he was going to see there. And David Stern is there. And David Stern is doing the handshake line. And Tom Ziller, horrified, finds himself in the handshake line with David Stern. And David Stern going down the line, looks at him and goes, Tom Ziller. He already knows his name. He goes, mind you, Tom doesn't have a picture in public. Tom doesn't have a picture online. And he knows who he is. And he shakes his hand and goes, well, nice to meet you, Mr. Stern. And David Stern leans in and goes, I know that's not your real name. And then that's what a commish should be. That's what he should be. And
Leave
that's
no
not what we're
stone unturned.
Be prepared, pick your battles, and keep your big fights quiet. That's what they haven't done.
It feels like MBS has put neon signs and look at me fireworks over every single fight that he has picked, and he has never seen a fight he wouldn't pick.
He is the first boss in every video game with the neon lights and the big fuck me here button as to where the weakness is.
Yeah, like, and how many of these has he definitively won? Like, this is to me it's a complete misunderstanding of what a sports bureaucrat should be. You are very fortunate to be in the space you are in, and you can exercise considerable power and yield significant profit both for yourself and your partners. Why are you not shutting up? Your business. Be quiet.
As Max in our chat quite rightly says, don't be the main character in racing. It never goes well in the end. Yeah. Never, ever. Don't be the main character. It never works out for you.
It's like it's like an Elmore Leonard novel. Elmore Leonard novel, there's two guys, there's one kind of character who survives and one who dies. The one who gets killed is always the one who's like, yeah, I'm a badass. And you know who doesn't die? The cool guy. Cool guy. Yeah. Whether you're like white hat or black hat, as long as you're cool, you're making it to the end of the book. My advice would be get cool.
Yeah. Adam Silver in a nutshell, baby. Just before we go as well, Spence, we normally pre-season, we always lay out some predictions. We get very competitive about this on this show. Like, as a humble brag, I've correctly predicted the last two Le Mans winners. It's a humble brag I will take to my grave.
That's good though.
So we're gonna put you in the same camp here. We've got a few questions to quick fire to give you. So, and we're going to put you in our guest pick section alongside the rest of us.
We don't have headwear. We don't expect that. We don't have a budget.
No, of course not. Maybe a championship belt if we get more budget on Patreon. Who knows? But
or your brother walks in the room.
Yeah, that is a thing. He owns a Universal title belt and he will rub it in my face. He's an Eagles fan. That's what they do.
Go Birds.
Exactly. Go Birds. Oh, that killed me. My tongue's on fire just saying that. And I say that as a Patriots fan. That hurts even more. Okay. Big one, Spence. Drivers' champion. Who do you reckon?
Am I going to do it? Oh, I'm going to do it. I want to see Charles win. win. So I want to take
Charles Leclerc title. My man.
Yeah, I say that. This is, by the way, if you want to know, like, head pick, it's like a 60% head pick and a 90% heart pick. Because sad boy Charles has been such a meme, such a running gag over the past 4 or 5 years. The idea of sad boy Charles winning it moves me too much for not to make the pick.
Entirely understandable. I want it to be a Charles Leclerc year. He's come close a couple of times. This might be the first year he's had a car from start to finish that can actually do it. So we'll have to wait and see how that plays out. Do you think Ferrari take the constructors, or do you have somebody else for the constructors title?
Well, if I've got Charles in the driver's title, then I might as well go ahead and double up. I will say,
full emotional Ferrari.
I know it's a fool, but at the same time, that would be banking on. I have to bank. All right, I'm gonna backtrack.
Oh,
my better angels are pulling me back. I will say that McLaren for constructors. I think that's the safe bet. I made one dangerous bet. Let's make a safe bet. I think McLaren's overall consistency and the way they've got this particular package dialed in. I'll go with house money, and I'll say McLaren.
That's entirely reasonable. Nobody picks Ferrari with their head. No one. It is purely emotional or dick thought. You don't pick them with your brain. Like, you pick them because you want them to win.
I picked them because I want to do this.
It just hits different.
The narcotic, Ferrari fan therapy, the church, all phrases we've used in the show to describe Ferrari anguish. Spencer, behind the big four, who finishes fifth in the constructors? Aston or somebody else?
Yeah, this is where you do something stupid, but it's low stakes, so I'm going to do something stupid. Yeah, you ready? Haas. Let's go.
Yeah.
Let's go. USA. Yeah.
The gritty.
We have nothing to be patriotic about right now, so I'm going to make Haas our thing. We're tying it all on Haas.
Half American, half Burnby, half Branbury. We love to see it. Yeah, Haas for fifth. Do you think there'll be a mid-season driver replacement?
Yeah, I do. Now I don't know what it is, but I just say based on the current carnivorous attitudes of most race teams toward their drivers, it seems like right now we have a glut of young drivers, and that's good. That's great for the sport. You know who it's bad for? Anyone who so much as stumbles. So
yes,
I would go ahead and put blanket for the field driver replacement. If I were gonna go particulars, I'm not gonna do that because there's so many possibilities.
All I'll say is Jack Doohan is a pretty untenable spot at Alpine, and he just got here.
Yeah, and like Alpine is one of those things where I go, I don't even know how they make decisions anymore at Alpine. So if you told me, right, like if you said
darts at a wall, honest to God, at this point,
and what better dart than, I don't know, try a new driver.
Yeah, exactly. The dart is Italian. It tastes of delicious carbonara. And Franco Colapinto is the walking definition of the guy they tell you not to worry about. Especially when you compare him to Jack doing his new military buzz cuts, which I thought was hilarious. When I saw him at the Autosport Awards debut and I was like, oh no, Jack, honey, what have you done? That was different. Last one, over or under 6.5 different winners.
Let's go over. Let's go. Why would I be anything but optimistic about the potential chaos of the season moving forward? I'm going to try to manifest over.
I love the fun. Spence, it's been an absolute pleasure. Before we get out of here, unrestricted, the floor is yours. Anything outside of racing, anything important you want to talk about, places we can find you if we haven't already. The floor is yours, Spencer. Play us out, my friend. It's all yours.
Thank you. I would first of all suggest that you subscribe to the Channel 6 newsletter, which is Holly and Anderson and I's twice weekly newsletter about all things various sport, gaming. Like, it's a lifestyle blog, but in newsletter form with a heavy accent on sports, games, and whatever else we find interesting. We will be writing about F1 there. Also, you can find us on the Shutdown Fullcast. That is Ryan, Andy, Jason, Kirk, Holly Anderson, and myself doing our best to not talk about college football on a college football podcast, but we do sometimes touch the sport, particularly in season. But, don't let that dissuade you if you're an automotive person, because we talk about all kinds of bullshit as well.
Spencer Hall, the greatest guest we've ever had on this podcast. We just cooked for nearly 50 minutes, and it was absolutely seamless. Thank you so much for coming on our Pokey Little Motoring podcast. You're welcome back anytime, my friend. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks, y'all. Thanks, Cam. Thanks, RJ. Thanks, Dre.
Thanks once again to Spencer Hall for giving us 45 minutes of his time. He was an incredible interview, the best I think we've ever had on this show. He was incredibly gracious with his time and disgustingly humble for a man who is so brilliant at what he does, from college football to ESPN, you name it, he's done it. He is tremendous. So thank you, Spencer.
And he knows
for your time. He absolutely knows ball, and
quite literally knows ball.
Yeah, what a guy! And it's our turn to make our predictions to close out this pod and to close out season preview season. And we've got 5 major tangents on this one. We're gonna go in reverse order because I think it's going to be more spicy.
Yeah.
First up, over or under 6.5 different winners.
We had 7 last year.
I think it's a good place to put the bar. I was tempted to go 5.5, but I've gone 6.5 here.
Yeah. 7 last year, and you know what? I feel the wave of optimism. I'm taking the over.
I'm gonna take the under. I'm gonna peg it at 6.
I'm gonna take the under. I think it'll be 5. I don't think Lawson wins a race. I don't think Antonelli wins a race. I have a bad feeling one of the Ferraris might go winless.
If Lewis Hamilton goes winless in a Ferrari, if Charles Leclerc goes winless in a Ferrari,
it's going to be World War III in Maranello. Don't worry about that.
Yeah, like
Heads will roll.
And that's just a Maranello. Could you imagine what the discourse is going to be like on the internet's #1 empty, abandoned mall of ideas?
Listen. I love Fred Vassar as much as the next person, but if he goes winless on the year with either of his drivers, he's sharing his bed in Maranello with a horse's head.
Dare I say it? I mean, I would lay this out. I think both Merc drivers are going to win a race. I think both Ferrari drivers are going to win a race.
Yeah.
I think both McLaren drivers are going to win a race. And if Max goes winless on this year, it is the end times.
Yeah.
You just went over.
I
Six. Oh, did I? I'm dumb. I'm really stupid. Give me the over. Math was never my strong suit.
I can't get this. I can't get to 7. Give me the under.
All right.
Next up, will there be a mid-season driver replacement?
Yes.
I feel like it's inevitable that there will be a mid-season driver replacement, and we know which one it is. It's Colapinto going in, going out. I wish it wasn't like this, but there are only too many grid slots.
Everything about Alpine suggests that Jack Doohan is not long for this world, which again begs the question: why the fuck did you give him the full-time seat in the first place if you knew you had the possibility of bringing Colapinto in?
That's the thing.
Because Flavio Briatore wasn't in power yet.
And the other thing is, too, at the time they signed him, they didn't know what Franco Colapinto was as an F1 commodity. We didn't know what he was as F1 commodity.
Alpine had no reason to rush this.
Yeah, but they ran Esteban Ocon out the door.
And
they
you lost out on Carlos Sainz when you entered at the 11th hour. What was the fucking rush for here?
Idiots. But that's nothing new with Alpine, and that's why they're not going to be a factory next year.
So all unanimously saying yes on that one?
Yeah.
Yeah, agreed. Who finishes 5th in the Constructors? Who gets the best of the rest mantle?
The funny thing is, I'm going to say Alpine. I think they'll be the best of the rest. I think Aston Martin are going to be, frankly, quite cheeks this year, and I don't have expectations of anyone else but Haas.
I've got a feeling that Aston Martin will not help but have Adrian Newey put his hand in the cookie jar. So I'm going to stay with Aston Martin.
I'm going to go. They had a good car to start testing. They have 2 outstanding drivers. Look, this is a no-stakes pick for me to say that Williams is going to finish 5th in the Constructors.
Sure.
Oh, Lord.
It would be highly probable, but hey, if it hits, I'm not rich.
It's ballsy, but I like it. If the car is good, they've got the best driver lineup of anybody in that midfield, top to bottom. It's a good punt. I like. It's like you look at the bookies. That's like a 20-1 shot, and you go, that's tempting. You know. So absolutely, I get it. Your Constructors champions will be.
Now that they've started the year with a good car, I am inclined to think it's McLaren.
McLaren, Mercedes.
I can't bet against McLaren. They've actually got a good package to start the year for the first time in at least 3 years. That should be enough, unless Ferrari's been hiding something this whole time, and I doubt that. I think McLaren hitting the ground running is so important in Formula One, especially this year, where it's going to be a matter of who can get off the pot quickest for 2026. If McLaren starts out the year strong, which I think they will, they will probably take both titles. So I'm going to say McLaren. So all of us unanimous on McLaren.
Yeah.
And finally, your 2025 Formula One World Champion will be...
Cam is holding up a Lego Red Bull, which signifies to me that
clearly Liam Lawson is going to surprise everyone. No.
Verstappen 5, Pete?
Verstappen 5, Pete, because tell you what,
God.
stick the Gran Terrorismo disc back in the PlayStation.
Could you imagine Verstappen with a 5 Pete before his 29th birthday?
Yeah.
Reason being, look, if it's 5/10, no. If it's 2 to 3, I have faith in Max to make that difference. And I do think Red Bull will be the biggest benefactors of the Flexi Wing ban. That comes in what, round 9?
Yeah, round 9. Spain is round 9.
We've seen Max run a gap down before. He can do it again.
And that's why
there's a gap.
I can't. I would love to move off of picking Max Verstappen, but it is an overriding theme of until he is beaten. I just can't bet against him right now.
I think Verstappen will be the victim of his own desperation, knowing he's going to have a threat right from the start this time rather than a third of the way into the season. It's a head v heart pick.
You're going Charles Leclerc. You're going Charles Leclerc.
I'm going to go Lando Norris.
You're going Lando Norris. Big quadrant guy, Dre Harrison.
It burns me with every fiber of my being because I'm not a fan of quadrant. I'm not the biggest Lando guy, but if he has the best car for more than 2/3 of the year this year, Norris did more than enough last year for me to convince me that he is a title threat. And I don't think he will make the same mistakes he made last year. So for me, I'm going to take Lando Norris. I really wanted to take Charles Leclerc on this one. I really did. And honestly, if you're a bookies guy, you can get 4-1 on Charles Leclerc. That's a really good price.
Dare I say it? The hottest take I will give probably all year. I would actually pick Charles over Lando in the final championship standings.
That's bold.
Yeah.
Charles Leclerc was hotter than fish grease in the second half of last year.
That down on Lando?
Yeah, I would say so. Look, the man almost been a dominant Singapore Grand Prix from the lead under no pressure. He's got to prove it to me this year. And Charles wasn't far off of taking it back away from him for second last year.
About a race in it.
And I think this year's Ferrari will be better than last year's Ferrari. On the virtue of, I don't know if they're going to get lost again for 3 months.
That will do it for this bumper Formula One season preview. It's going to be a fascinating 2025 season. I'm going to now have a long shower and wash off the humiliation of me picking Lando Norris to win a title because I feel dirty inside.
How does it feel to be rooting for the Valentino Rossi fan?
Like everything I know and love is dead.
All right, so remember the bikes.
Our bikes.
Think about
our
bikes.
About the bikes.
Our bikes.
About the bikes.
That'll be next week on Motorsport 101 as we get our reviews out of the way for MotoGP in Thailand and IndyCar in St. Petersburg. Huge thanks one more time to Spencer Hall for coming on. Much appreciated. And of course, Cameron Buckley and RJ O'Connell, my brothers in arms, as ever. We'll be back next week to talk bikes, our bikes, in the middle of our street. Our bikes and IndyCar. Until then, I've been Dre Harrison. They've been Cam Buckley and RJ O'Connell. Thank you very much for listening. Good night.
Oh,